A massive underground vault beneath the Vatican has just been opened after more than 5,000 years, sealed in total darkness. Inside, they discovered the Apocalypse of Peter, a manuscript so terrifying in its description of hell that it was removed from the Bible. And deeper still lay the oldest known copy of the Book of Enoch, a text that once struck fear into the heart of the Church. For it spoke of fallen angels, giants, and the end of days. Since then, one by one, forbidden scrolls have surfaced, manuscripts thought to be burned, banned, or hidden forever. Ancient pages no one was ever meant to read. And tonight, you will be the one to turn them. As always, the visuals in this video are only here to help you relax. You don't have to watch, just let the words carry you. Whether you're studying, winding down, or simply seeking sleep, consider this video a gentle companion guiding you through the vast, silent corridors of the Vatican, where secrets lie buried beneath centuries of stone and truths the Church may never have wanted humanity to know. Now imagine yourself descending a cold staircase, where silence has reigned for millennia. The mysterious underground vault discovered after 5,000 years awaits. The forbidden underground vault. What lies beneath Vatican soil? For centuries, whispers have persisted of a hidden chamber beneath the Vatican, unnamed on any map, forbidden in conversation, yet said to have existed in silence for over 5,000 years. Scattered writings from the 3rd century speak of a sealed house beneath the altar, a place rumored to contain ancient manuscripts. Some believe to predate even the Bible itself. Tonight, we follow in the footsteps of archaeologists to discover what unspeakable truths might lie inside this forgotten sanctuary. Secrets the world may have never been meant to see. It all began when a fracture appeared beneath a crumbling marble floor. A narrow tunnel was uncovered, extending nearly 20 meters underground. The air thick and stale. The walls cold, rough, silent. Only faint flashlight beams revealed strange symbols etched directly into stone, neither Latin nor Greek, nor any ancient Hebrew script ever known. At the end of the tunnel stood a towering stone door nearly 2 meters high, sealed with dense blocks of lead. No handle, no hinges. Only a single recessed groove at its center, as if awaiting a lost object to trigger its opening. For nearly 3 weeks, researchers chipped away at the surrounding stone. Then, without warning, the door slid open on its own. Beyond it lay a domed chamber roughly 30 square meters wide, swallowed in total silence. There was no altar, no crucifix. Only rows of short wooden shelves coated in dust, stacked with dozens of blackened boxes made of aged ebony, sealed in beeswax and bound in gilded copper wire. Some bore strange symbols, a downward folded wing, a circle within a triangle, or mirrored letters, as if scrawled in a forgotten tongue. Inside the first box they opened was a thin sheet of faded parchment. But the title line was still legible: Apocalypsis Petri, the Apocalypse of Peter. A book once read aloud in early Christian churches, but later banned by the Church for its disturbing visions of hell's souls hung upside down. Boiling cauldrons, punishing angels with monstrous forms, and a chilling warning that those who speak in God's name might be the first to be judged. As they delved deeper, more boxes revealed themselves. A Gehi's manuscript of the Book of Enoch, telling of fallen angels and giants from the time before the Great Flood. A massive handwritten scroll on animal hide, untitled, with only one final line: Nolit leger hoc. Do not read this. And in a dark corner at the back of the chamber, a box sealed in lead, etched with the sacred letters IHS, a holy symbol of Jesus, but crossed out with a large X. Could this place truly be hiding truths too dangerous for Scripture itself? And if all this is just the beginning, then what lies deeper within the labyrinth, a vault said to house the books Vatican forbade the world to ever read? The forbidden maze, beneath the Vatican, where the lost books sleep. Beneath the surface of the Vatican lies more than just record rooms and archives. According to retired clergy, and leaked internal notes, the underground complex is said to be far more intricate, a multi-layered labyrinth first carved out during the Roman Empire, then slowly expanded across centuries like the circulatory system of some ancient living entity. Some say there are corridors that lead to secret reading chambers, vaults reserved for books struck from the Bible. Each chamber is separated by narrow passageways, spiral staircases, and sealed doors with forgotten codes, accessible only to a chosen few within the highest circles of the Church. Among the forbidden texts hidden within this maze, some are whispered of more than others. The Gospel of Thomas, a collection of Jesus' direct sayings unfiltered by later interpretation. Its message was considered dangerous, claiming that the kingdom of heaven is within you. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, a text that portrays Mary not merely as a follower, but as someone who may have understood truths that even the male apostles failed to grasp. The Book of Jubilees, the Book of Noah, and even the Book of Lilith, an ancient manuscript about the mysterious figure said to be Adam's first wife, cast out and erased from the official canon. Some scholars claim there are texts written in Phoenician, Ancient Egyptian, and Sanskrit describing winged celestial beings who descended from higher realms, bearing knowledge of language numbers and the turning of cosmic ages. Each manuscript is catalogued, wrapped in animal hide, and sealed with red wax stamped with a six-pointed star, a symbol now forbidden from use in modern ritual. No one truly knows how many documents are hidden within the maze. No one dares claim they've seen it all. Only one thing is certain: those who have gone deep enough never return with quite the same eyes. The Book of Enoch, the fallen angels and the secrets removed from Scripture. There was once a book revered by early Christians as a sacred prophecy, one that didn't just recount heavenly visions, but revealed one of the darkest stories in theological history: the betrayal of the angels. That book is the Book of Enoch. Though it appeared in many early biblical collections, it was eventually excluded from both the Old and New Testaments and labeled as apocryphal for thousands of years. According to Scripture, Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah, a man who was taken by God without ever tasting death. But the Book of Enoch explains why Enoch was chosen to be guided through the heavens by angels witnessing firsthand what was about to unfold for humanity. He saw rivers of radiant light, celestial gates, and monstrous beings chained deep below beings who once carried light but were now bound in eternal darkness for their unforgivable sins. What made this book dangerous in the eyes of the Church was its detailed account of 200 angels who descended to earth not just to watch over humankind, but to fall in love with human women, marry them, and give birth to a hybrid race called the Nephilim, giants of immense strength, cruelty, and bloodlust. These angels didn't just love, they taught. They showed humans how to forge weapons, craft jewelry, manipulate appearances, and defy natural order. Their leader was Semjaza, and the most notorious among them was Azazel, the one who taught mankind the art of war. God was furious. He sent the Archangel Uriel to guide Enoch, instructing him to record every transgression of the Watchers, the heavenly beings who had turned against their purpose. Enoch did more than right. He became their judge, delivering a divine sentence that all who had fallen would be bound beneath the earth until the day of judgment. But Enoch's book wasn't just about punishment. It also contained astoundingly precise descriptions of ancient astronomy, documenting the lunar cycle, the movement of celestial bodies, and the gates of heaven, where light would rise and set throughout the seasons. Modern scholars have been astonished by the book's accuracy, written over 2,000 years ago, yet describing the solar and lunar systems with near-modern precision. Perhaps that too made the text too dangerous. The Book of Enoch also foretells the coming of a Son of Man, a chosen one from the heavens who would return at the end of days to judge humanity and restore justice. Many believe this figure laid the theological groundwork for later concepts of a Messiah. But because of these controversial elements, from fallen angels who loved mortals to predictions of cosmic destiny, Enoch's writings were cast out, labeled heresy, and buried in silence for centuries. Only a few Ge'ez manuscripts survived, preserved quietly in the highlands of Ethiopia. Pieces of a truth denied, but never fully erased. Azazel, the angel who taught mankind to rebel. Among the 200 fallen angels described in the Book of Enoch, none inspired as much fear in both heaven and earth as Azazel. Unlike the others who fell out of love for human women, Azazel was remembered for a deeper transgression. He taught humanity how to rebel. Azazel didn't come to earth merely to observe. He brought forbidden knowledge. He taught people how to forge metal craft weapons, sharpen blades, and create armor. He showed them how to make jewelry, adorn their bodies, use dyes, and apply cosmetics to seduce. But the most dangerous thing he gave them wasn't material, it was an idea. He taught them how to manipulate truth, seize power, and trade morality for desire. To ancient eyes, Azazel might have seemed like a teacher, a bringer of light. But in the eyes of heaven, he was the one who planted the seed of rebellion in mankind. As the earth fell into chaos, war spread and blood was shed without end. Enoch was led by angels to witness the consequences. And then came the divine decree. Azazel was to be bound, buried in eternal darkness until the day of judgment. The hands that once uplifted knowledge were chained deep beneath the earth in a place called Dudael, a prison of shadow where no light reaches, no wind stirs, and even sound is swallowed by stone. From that moment on, whenever humans committed acts of cruelty or betrayed their own kind, some would whisper that Azazel's influence still lingered within the human heart. In later legends, he is not just a fallen angel. In some traditions, Azazel is a cursed demon doomed to roam the souls of those who crave dominion. His name has been erased from official scripture, but not from the shadows where mankind is still tempted by knowledge that steps beyond the bounds of morality. Perhaps this is why the Vatican hid the Book of Enoch. Because within the tale of Azazel, we see more than just an angel's downfall. We see how humans first learned to betray the light. Dudael, the dark abyss, where the fallen are bound. If Azazel was the first to sow rebellion, then Dudael was the place where all consequences were sealed away forever. After Azazel taught humankind how to forge weapons, manipulate beauty, and twist morality for power, the world plunged into chaos. Not just war, but the rise of a race never meant to exist. The Nephilim giants born of the forbidden union between angels and mortals. They were bloodthirsty, destructive, and brought civilization to its knees. When the cries of humanity reached the heavens, judgment was passed. Azazel was bound in chains of celestial fire and cast into a deep, lightless pit known as Dudael, a barren wasteland where the winds groaned like the breath of the damned and the rocks sliced like blades. No path led back from it. There he was buried beneath layers of burning stone and sealed with lead. At the surface, the angel Uriel erected a pillar carved with a reversed divine symbol as an eternal warning. Do not call. Do not seek. Do not open. But like all things forbidden, Dudael was never truly forgotten. Ancient texts in Ge'ez Hebrew and Latin continued to whisper of a location marked as highly classified by the Vatican. Some described a place where a body of darkness lies sealed beneath layers of limestone. A smudged entry from the Vatican's secret archives even bears one chilling line, dormant. Sed non in aeternum. It sleeps, but not forever. And that was only the surface of the secret. Because the Vatican is not merely the keeper of Azazel's prison, it also guards the oldest surviving manuscripts of what he left behind. A race of giants that once walked the earth and vanished after the Great Flood. But they didn't leave empty-handed. Their legacy remains etched into a scroll of animal skin, too dangerous to be canonized, too haunting to be forgotten. A forbidden document locked away in the Vatican's deepest labyrinth. Its name is enough to send chills down the spine of even the eldest monks. The Book of Giants, the offspring of the Grigori and Humankind. Although Azazel had been bound in Dudael, the consequences of his rebellion did not vanish. The earth still bears scars from the era when angels once walked among men. Among the most feared were the Grigori, a group of watchers who were meant to protect humanity, but instead broke their divine oath. Driven by desire, they passed on forbidden knowledge and fathered a race that belonged neither to heaven nor to earth. These were the giants Nephilim, the offspring of fallen light and mortal blood. No one knows exactly how tall they were. Some texts claim they stood over 10 feet tall. Others say they reached the clouds. But every account agrees on one thing. Wherever they walked, they were worshipped like false gods and left only devastation behind. These Nephilim became the focus of one of the most disturbing texts ever discovered. The Book of Giants, a document never recognized by any official canon and long suppressed from public eyes. This book was first unearthed in 1947 among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. But many scholars believe the Vatican had possessed a far older copy written in Aramaic and sealed within the forbidden levels of their private archives. The Book of Giants recounts the terrifying dreams experienced by the Nephilim shortly before the Great Flood. In their visions, the earth crumbled, the tree of life fell, and tidal waters swallowed the highest mountains. Some of them, Mahaway Ohia and Hahia, sought out the prophet Enoch, begging him to speak on their behalf before the divine. But it was already too late. They confessed their dread of extinction, sleepless nights, and recurring blood-soaked visions. They did not understand why they had been born or why they had been cursed since the moment of their creation. Even more unsettling is the fact that the book has no ending, no judgment, no resolution. Just a stretch of blank parchment followed by a single red line scrawled in a trembling hand. They did not vanish. They merely retreated deeper. The Vatican has never acknowledged the Book of Giants. Several sources suggest that it was blacklisted as a permanently restricted document, forbidden to be copied, quoted, or read aloud. A handwritten letter from 1584 by the monk Jean-Marie M. to Pope Sixtus V warns, "This Book of the Giants contains words unfit for mortal ears. They are a lost bloodline, but their shadows still walk among the centuries." And if that is true, then perhaps the Church is not only guarding a text, but safeguarding the memory of a race that once came close to destroying everything. A race that may not be gone, only waiting to be named again. The Apocalypse of Peter, a hell unlike the one in today's Bible. If the Book of Giants serves as evidence of a race condemned to destruction, then the Apocalypse of Peter opens the door to a universe far more terrifying, where punishment comes not from devils, but from the sacred law mankind once dared to ignore. This is one of the oldest apocalyptic texts written under the name of an apostle. In the early centuries of Christianity, it was read aloud in many congregations alongside the Gospels. But by the 4th century, when the Church began to formalize the New Testament canon, the Apocalypse of Peter was quietly excluded, vanishing from public worship without announcement, without reason. Some scholars believe it was removed because its descriptions of hell were too detailed. Others argue it wasn't omitted for lack of sanctity, but because it was too real. In the text, Peter is guided by an angel through the realms of hell. Not a monotonous abyss, but many separate domains, each containing a punishment tailored to a specific sin. False prophets who once preached deceit are hung upside down by their tongues, blood dripping endlessly into a river of fire. Hypocrites who prayed in public to gain praise are suffocated by the echo of their own deceitful words. Those who destroyed innocents, especially those who abused children, are forced to relive every act they committed again and again, like a cruel replay within their minds, offering no escape. Each punishment mirrors the sin. Each angel of judgment bears no sword, no flame, only icy, unblinking eyes, devoid of anger or mercy, fulfilling divine justice with terrifying precision. Unlike the Book of Revelation by John, where the focus is a battle between good and evil, between saints and the beast, The Apocalypse of Peter places its spotlight on those who wear the robes of holiness yet live a lie. And it is they who are judged first. Peter once asked, "Lord, did not these people serve you?" And the answer came, "He who does evil in my name shall be the first I cast away." That may be why the Apocalypse of Peter was never officially recognized by the early church. For centuries, it was believed the original manuscript had been lost. Only fragments survived, scattered across Egypt. But then, something strange happened. In the early 20th century, a nearly complete copy was unearthed in the ancient cemetery of Akhmim, hidden beneath 3 layers of earth and stone, on the box that held the scroll buried under 1,000 years of dust. Archaeologists noticed an embossed seal. The symbol did not belong to any known Egyptian era. Instead, it resembled an emblem commonly found in one place, the Vatican's secret archives. Next to the seal, a Latin phrase had been carved, "Caveant sacerdotes," "Let the priests beware." This discovery raised a disturbing question. Had the Vatican known about this text all along? And if they had, why was it hidden? Some researchers believe it's because the Apocalypse of Peter doesn't just describe hell. It exposes a religious mechanism that can turn human beings into instruments of divine judgment. It doesn't speak of an evil force from the outside, but of a rot growing quietly within the very walls of the church, something the Vatican has long avoided confronting. And if hell is truly what Peter saw, then perhaps the most terrifying part isn't the demons waiting in the dark, but the moment the angels turn away. The Acts of Thomas, a hidden prophecy of the East. If the Apocalypse of Peter made the church uneasy with its disturbingly vivid depictions of hell, then the Acts of Thomas, an ancient text once removed from the Bible, left the Vatican quietly perplexed. Among the many religious manuscripts that the Church has excluded from canon, the Acts of Thomas stands out as one of the few that contains no mention of demons or punishment. Instead, it holds something perhaps even more sensitive, a prophecy of a distant land in the east and of a people who will rise in the final days. According to the manuscript, Jesus assigned each of his apostles a region to spread the gospel. Thomas, the same apostle who once doubted the resurrection, was commanded to journey east. He hesitated, but a strange dream led him away from Jerusalem, across deserts and into the far reaches of India. There, Thomas not only preached and healed, he also wrote down a series of prophetic visions, ones that never made it into the modern Bible. In the final section of the Syriac version, Thomas wrote, "In the last days from the east shall rise a people who wield no sword, but endure with patience. They shall not rebuild Babel, but restore what is good and pure. They will not spread power, but truth long forgotten." These words are absent from all Latin copies, because the Vatican once labeled them as heretical allegory, implying a coming savior beyond the traditional scriptures. At the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, the Acts of Thomas was formally excluded from the New Testament. All copies were ordered destroyed, except for those written in Syriac, which quietly circulated among Eastern Christian communities. But what's even more unsettling, inside the Vatican's secret archives, scholars uncovered a sealed Syriac manuscript of the Acts of Thomas, preserved in a cedarwood box, coated in beeswax, and bound with braided copper wire. Its catalog code, Codex 399X. Carved into the box was a curious Latin phrase, "Veritas orietur ab oriente," truth shall rise from the east. This document has never been made public, but a marginal note scribbled by a 15th century Vatican archivist reads, "If this prophecy is true, then the final light of Scripture will not emerge from Rome. It will come from those whose names Roman history refused to speak." And perhaps that is why the Vatican chose to bury the entire manuscript, a forgotten prophecy of a people yet to rise, of a land in the east where truth, compassion, and forbearance may one day cleanse humanity like fire. No armies, no empires, only awakening. If what Thomas saw was true, then the figure hinted at in the Vatican's hidden prophecy may not be of Jewish lineage nor crowned by Rome, but a humble man who authored a book that has quietly transformed millions of lives around the world. That book is Juan Falun, the main text of Falun Dafa, not a religion, not an organization, but a path of inner cultivation rooted in three timeless principles: truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. What's extraordinary is that this book has been translated into over 40 languages, spreading to hundreds of countries without advertising, without funding. It makes no promises of heaven nor threats of hell. It simply teaches people how to return to their true kind and upright nature. And in a world unraveling amid war plague and the collapse of moral foundations, this book has become a quiet light in the hearts of millions, regardless of religion, race, or nationality. Could this be the final light Thomas glimpsed in his vision? Could it be that the saint from the East has already appeared not in temples, but in everyday life? Not wielding a sword, not raising towers, but silently offering a book to the world so that whoever awakens will know how to return home. The Book of the Bee, the Eastern prophecy of the end times. If you still have doubts, then this will be the next piece of evidence showing that the prophecy of a Savior rising from the East is absolutely real. It wasn't only mentioned by Thomas, a close disciple of Jesus, but also reaffirmed by an Eastern bishop who lived more than 1,000 years later. The work is known as the Book of the Bee, compiled by Bishop Solomon of Basra in the 13th century in what is now modern-day Iraq. At first glance, it might seem like just another theological annotation. But the deeper one delves into its chapters, the clearer it becomes that the Book of the Bee is no ordinary Christian history. It is a mystical chronicle recording the entire process of creation, the fall of the angels, the emergence of humankind, and most notably, a prophetic cycle of the ages of humanity. In the final part of the book, the author writes about the last days, a time when the world falls into chaos, morality collapses, and people become cold, disconnected from their innate goodness. But he also emphasizes, at the end of this age, a fire shall rise from where the sun rises, and the bearer of that light shall not come with fame, but with silent awakening. Modern scholars have interpreted this statement as a prophecy of the East. Not Eastern Rome, not Eastern Europe, but the true East, the place where the day begins, where the sun rises. A sacred land of wisdom and enlightenment, according to many ancient traditions. What's remarkable is this: the Book of the Bee does not portray the Savior as someone fitting the familiar mold. The one foretold has no army, no crown, no temple, no miracles, only a simple person carrying a book with words that awaken the soul. Many Vatican scholars have rejected this section of the Book of the Bee, labeling it unorthodox. However, in an ancient copy preserved at the library of the Holy City of Karakosh, Iraq, researchers discovered a final Syriac annotation, which reads, "He will come from an empire once despised, but he comes not to rule, but to return the truth. Not with law, but with the way. Not with commandment, but with the path back to the divine." At this point, the prophecy is no longer a metaphor. It is a clear sign that in the final days, the Creator will not appear from the West, as commonly portrayed in the Bible, but will arrive from the East in silence and compassion. Could it be that because this message deviated too far from Orthodox theology, the Book of the Bee was never included in the Bible? Could it be that because it laid bare the truth, that the final light would not come from Rome, but from someone who brings an inner path of awakening, that the Vatican allowed it to be forgotten in the sands of time? But history cannot hide the light forever. And today, as millions around the world practice Falun Dafa, a spiritual discipline rooted in ancient China, and follow the teachings of Master Li Hongji, it seems that the words of the Book of the Bee have come true. The Book of Mary Magdalene, the secret of the woman closest to Jesus. If the Acts of Thomas made the Vatican uneasy for containing prophecies that could change the world if revealed, then the Book of Mary Magdalene posed a more silent kind of threat. What if the woman the Church had long labeled a forgiven sinner was actually the one who held the deepest spiritual understanding of Jesus' teachings? For centuries, the Vatican remained silent about Mary Magdalene's true role, not only as the so-called penitent, but also as the first to witness the resurrection. Yet in 1945, a forgotten manuscript unearthed in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, revealed a version of history far different from what the official Gospels tell. This text, often referred to as the Gospel of Mary, presents a secret dialogue between Mary and the other apostles after Christ's death. In it, she recounts what Jesus revealed to her in private, the nature of the soul. The 4 layers of temptation it must transcend to return to its divine origin and a path of liberation that requires neither rituals nor religious hierarchy. The deeper one reads, the clearer it becomes. Mary was not just a witness, she may have been the one who understood the true essence of Jesus' message more than anyone else. In one striking exchange, Peter, seen by many as the Church's first leader, asks, "Did the Savior really speak these things to a woman?" To which Levi replies, "If the teacher considered her worthy, who are we to reject her?" That answer was more than a defense of Mary. It was a challenge to the very power structure the Church had upheld for centuries. And for that reason, the Book of Mary Magdalene was never included in the official canon. Most Latin versions disappeared. Only a few Syriac and Coptic fragments survived, buried deep in the sands of time. But within the Vatican secret archives, that vast vault of sealed documents, scholars discovered an ancient manuscript bearing the code Codex 276S. It was sealed in a cedar wood box, coated in beeswax, and bound with red copper wire. On the lid, carved by hand in Latin, was a single phrase, Veritas in femina truth lies within the woman. That inscription seems to be an unspoken acknowledgement of Mary's spiritual significance, one the official Church has long tried to erase. And if the contents of this book are true, then the Vatican is not merely hiding a forbidden gospel. It is concealing the one who may have held the original soul of the faith the entire world came to follow. The Index Librorum, Prohibitorum, the Vatican's hidden blacklist of books never meant to be read. There exists a list, not a prophecy nor a secret code, but one that haunted Europe for over 400 years. A list never taught in churches, yet one that silently shaped what you could read, think, and believe. It is the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books by the Vatican. But this wasn't just a list. It was a gate, a threshold into the dark side of knowledge, where the Church held the power to decide which book could circulate, and which one, if read, could damn your soul to hell. The list was formally established in 1559 under Pope Paul IV, yet long before that Catholic councils had already begun quietly suppressing certain texts, branding them incompatible with the faith. At first it was said to protect believers from heresy, but over time the reasons became murkier. The line between heresy and innovation, between truth and danger, grew thinner with each passing century. One of the first to be banned was Giordano Bruno, a 16th century Italian philosopher who dared to suggest the universe was infinite, that multiple worlds existed beyond Earth. To the Vatican, this wasn't just heresy. It was a direct threat to the Church's divine authority. Bruno was burned at the stake in 1600. His works were erased from Catholic printing presses. And yet, in the deepest vaults of the Vatican secret archives, his manuscript De l'Infinito Universo et Mondi was found bearing the handwritten curse Ad Perpetuam Damnationem, for eternal damnation. Another case was René Descartes, the philosopher who wrote the famous line, "I think, therefore I am." His Meditationes de Prima Philosophia was banned in 1663. Why? Because he claimed that truth could be reached through reason, not solely through scripture. In other words, personal awakening was considered dangerous. And it wasn't just philosophy. Science, too, fell under fire. Medical texts by Paracelsus were banned because he taught that the human body mirrored the cosmos, and that healing could come through understanding, not just through prayer. Even De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium by Copernicus, which proposed that the Earth revolved around the Sun, was locked away for over 200 years, only resurfacing when its political threat had faded. Literature wasn't spared either. Boccaccio's The Decameron, a collection of tales set during the plague, was blacklisted for over 3 centuries for its indecent themes. Works by Voltaire, Rousseau, and Pascal all made the list. Each entry was marked coldly with the phrase Prohibitur usque ad emendationem, forbidden until corrected. But perhaps the most terrifying entries were the ones without names. In the Vatican's Codex Indexium archive, there exist manuscripts labeled only with the code 00 nulla. No title, no author, no publicly disclosed content. Some scholars believe these are books of prophecy mysticism or alternate doctrines so radical, the Church dared not even speak their names. One such text was revealed in 1897, Liber Veritatis Absentis, the Book of Missing Truth. It described a form of spiritual transmission that required no ritual, no pope, only meditation and a righteous heart. The Vatican's handwritten note beside it read simply, Periculosissimum, extremely dangerous. And while these forbidden books now lie sealed and forgotten, there are mysteries that were never even written down, not on parchment, not sealed with wax, but passed down through visions, divine revelations that the Church fears even more than ink and page. One such secret has been locked away in the Vatican's safe for nearly a century, known only to the Pope and a few senior cardinals. Its full contents remain hidden to this day. It is the third secret of Fatima, a prophecy so powerful, so unsettling, that the Vatican chose silence over disclosure. Would you like me to continue writing this next section about the third secret of Fatima? Hi, ChatGPT. The third secret of Our Lady of Fatima, why it was kept hidden for nearly a century. In 1917, in a small village called Fatima in Portugal, 3 shepherd children claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary appear amid a radiant light from the sun. Not just once, but 6 times over several months. Each time the woman in pure white delivered a message. 3 messages, or more precisely, 3 prophecies. The first 2 were made public early on. They spoke of war of hell and of Russia's role in the fate of mankind. But the third prophecy, written down by Lucia, the eldest of the 3, in 1944, was never immediately revealed. The handwritten letter containing the third secret was sealed and delivered securely to the Vatican. The Pope at the time, Pius XII, opened it, read its contents, and locked it away in a safe. For decades afterward, no one knew exactly what was written in it. No believers, no bishops. Only the Pope and a handful of senior cardinals were granted access. But none of them spoke a word. Not a single line was made public. Why did the Vatican remain silent? That question left millions of Catholics uneasy. Many believed if it were a prophecy of hope, the Church would have revealed it long ago. It could only be something too horrifying or too sensitive to be shared with the world. One widely circulated theory suggested that the third secret described a spiritual collapse within the Church itself, a moral crisis from within, with numerous crimes hidden under sacred authority, an attack from the inside not by demons, but by those wearing holy robes. Some unofficial notes claimed that the prophecy spoke of an assassinated pope, a ruined city, and a group of priests killed for following the truth. Some scholars went further, suggesting the prophecy pointed to a global crisis of faith in which religious values were manipulated by those who once represented them. And for that reason, the Vatican could not risk making it public. In the year 2000, under growing public pressure, the Vatican announced it had finally released the full text of the third secret. But many scholars believed the published version was only a portion or had been edited. The prophecy merely described a vision, a man in white, presumably the Pope, being shot by soldiers while walking through rubble. No names, no dates, no explicit warning, just silence, and a denial that anything more frightening existed. Yet in the Vatican's secret archives, researchers discovered a strange annotation, not a copy of the prophecy itself, but a handwritten comment from a cardinal during the Cold War. It read, "What is written in this letter, if made public, could cause the faithful to abandon the church in droves." And that raises a deeper question. Was the secret not just an apocalyptic vision, but a truth about the Vatican's real role in the end times? If so, then what was kept hidden for nearly a century wasn't merely an image, but a warning that evil can wear white robes, and salvation may not come from where we once believed was sacred. The Forbidden Map. The ancient cosmic diagram by Copernicus, the Church tried to hide. In an age when the Church held not only spiritual power, but also the authority to decide which truths could be shared with the world, a single map emerged, quietly challenging that divine order. Not a map of lands or seas, but a map of the cosmos. It was called De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, on the revolutions of the celestial spheres, completed in 1543 by a Polish mathematician and astronomer named Nicholas Copernicus. With seemingly simple strokes, Copernicus drew a vision that would forever change the way humanity looked at the stars. In his model, he did not place the Earth at the center, as theologians had done for millennia. He placed the sun. It was a quiet declaration, but a revolutionary one. The Earth is not the center of the universe. We are merely one of many planets orbiting the sun. And humanity is not the centerpiece of creation. To us today, this heliocentric model may seem ordinary, but in the 16th century it was considered heresy. According to church doctrine, the Earth was motionless, centered perfectly in the heavens, created as the stage for God's gaze. To say otherwise was to question not just astronomy, but the divine order itself. So when Copernicus's work was published in Nuremberg, it quickly fell under scrutiny. And by 1616, just over 70 years later, the Catholic Church officially banned the book, adding it to the index Librorum Prohibitorum, the list of forbidden books. But it wasn't just the text that disturbed the Church. It was the cosmic diagram within. A simple circle sun at the center, concentric orbits spiraling around it like layers of an onion. But that image alone threatened the Church's entire control over cosmic truth, because if the Earth wasn't the center, then what else might no longer be sacred? So the order was issued. All printed copies of De Revolutionibus were to be seized. The image was deemed a misleading and heretical illustration, and it was sealed away in the secret archives of the Vatican. Anyone who taught or copied the heliocentric model risked being charged with heresy. No one understood this danger better than Galileo Galilei, who was summoned before the Inquisition for openly supporting Copernicus. He was forced to recant his belief and spent the rest of his life under house arrest. For over 200 years, Copernicus's map remained in silence, unreprinted, unspoken, undreamed. The world continued to turn, but knowledge stood still. It wasn't until 1822 that the Vatican quietly lifted the ban. But by then the map had already ignited a revolution of thought, paving the way for Kepler, Newton, and later Einstein. Perhaps that diagram wasn't just a piece of astronomy. Perhaps it was a sacred reminder that truth, even when buried, will always return to its orbit. Just as the sun, once exiled from the center, always rises again from behind the darkest veil. The Atlantis map and the forgotten civilizations the Vatican never spoke of. Hidden deep within the labyrinthine shelves of the Vatican secret archives lie maps, ancient, faded, and almost forgotten. They do not depict modern empires or known continents. Instead, they whisper of something older, something erased. Among them is a set of maps attributed to ancient Greek sources thought to be copies of even older Atlantean or Egyptian cartography. These maps depict a vast landmass in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, flanked by strange symbols and annotations alluding to a powerful civilization lost beneath the waves. The land is not labeled Atlantis, at least not in Latin. Instead, it bears names like Antilia Poseidonia or simply Terra Incognita. Some versions include notes in ancient Greek reading, "before the flood," or "destroyed by fire and water." These are not fantasy sketches, they are cartographic records drawn with the same precision as maps of the Mediterranean. And yet, these maps were never shown to the public. The Vatican obtained them during the height of the Renaissance, when ancient knowledge flowed back into Europe through translations, pilgrimages, and secret excavations. Some were gifts from Eastern churches, others were seized during political conquests. All were locked away. Why? Because the idea of a pre-Adamic civilization of humans, or beings that lived and fell long before Adam and Eve, challenges the very timeline that official theology relies on. It raises the question if there were others before us. What became of them, and who were they really? One map, in particular, traced back to a lost library in Constantinople, was marked with a mysterious red wax seal bearing the insignia of Pope Innocent VIII. It was labeled non exhibenda extra ecclesiam, not to be displayed outside the church. According to a side note in the archive's catalog, this map came with a manuscript describing a ring of knowledge that once circled the earth, 7 civilizations connected by sky fire, each guided by the same celestial order. The manuscript called it the Order Before Babel. Some researchers believe these are remnants of a global pre-flood culture, what many ancient traditions describe as the First World. A time of giants' divine knowledge and flying machines. Not myth, not metaphor, memory. So why hasn't the church revealed these maps? Because if Atlantis and its sister civilizations truly existed, and if they fell, not due to God's wrath, but due to their own corruption, then the story of humanity is not one of innocence lost, but wisdom forgotten. The church could not risk a narrative where man had once mastered the stars, only to fall into darkness again. In private letters, some Vatican scholars even referenced a concept known as the cycle of suns, a belief that Earth has undergone multiple epochs of civilization and collapse, each wiped clean by a cosmic reset. The maps then are not warnings of a singular past, but markers of our recurring fate. Today, as satellite imaging and deep-sea sonar begin to pick up unusual geometric patterns beneath the Atlantic whispers of Atlantis' return. But centuries before Google Earth, someone had already drawn those shapes. Someone knew, and those someones may have tried to warn us, but their message sits in a vault, behind locked doors, beneath centuries of silence. Because sometimes the most dangerous truths are not the ones we cannot understand, but the ones we are not allowed to remember. The trial files of Galileo, when science was condemned as heresy. In the heart of the Vatican, behind thick stone walls and iron-bound doors, rests a set of files rarely spoken of aloud. They are not maps nor ancient scrolls of prophecy. They are legal documents, testimonies, signed verdicts. The official record of how one of the most revolutionary minds in human history was declared a heretic. These are the trial files of Galileo Galilei. It was the early 1600s. The Earth, according to church doctrine, was still the unmoving center of the cosmos. The heavens revolved around mankind, as did the stars, the moon, and the sun. This geocentric view was not just scientific dogma, it was spiritual truth. Questioning it meant questioning the divine order. But then came Galileo. With a telescope of his own making, he peered into the night sky and saw things no man had seen so clearly before. Moons orbiting Jupiter, phases on Venus, sunspots, shadows, evidence that the universe was not as fixed and perfect as once thought. And most dangerous of all, he supported the model proposed by Copernicus, which stated the Earth moved around the sun. A silent revolution had begun. But to the church, this was more than disagreement. It was defiance. In 1616, Galileo was warned, "Stop teaching the heliocentric model." He was told to speak of it only hypothetically. He agreed. But years later, emboldened by new findings and the encouragement of some within the papal court, Galileo published a book, Dialogue, concerning the two chief world systems. Though framed as a discussion, it clearly favored the Copernican system. Worse yet, it made the defenders of geocentrism look like fools. The Church did not take this lightly. In 1633, Galileo was summoned to Rome and placed on trial for vehement suspicion of heresy. The trial files show a man forced to recant his life's work, to kneel before inquisitors, and deny the very truth he had seen through glass. He was found guilty, sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life. But here's the part rarely told. The Vatican didn't destroy his writings. They archived them, along with detailed notes, personal letters, and annotations from church officials, some sympathetic, some damning. There are documents in the secret archives that suggest a deep internal divide within the church. Some cardinals believed Galileo was right, but feared that his truth would unravel more than just astronomy. It would unravel the authority of the church itself. For centuries, these files remained locked away. Only in the late 20th century did the Vatican officially acknowledge its error. In 1992, 359 years after the verdict, Galileo was formally cleared. But even that rehabilitation left out many details of what happened behind closed doors. Some say there were debates about whether the church had the right to silence nature's voice. Others say the trial wasn't just about science, but about power. Because when truth challenges tradition, it becomes dangerous. And Galileo's telescope wasn't just a lens, it was a mirror, one that reflected not only the stars, but the fear of those who tried to control the sky. The mechanical blueprints. In the Vatican, was Da Vinci's legacy suppressed? Tucked within the sealed chambers of the Vatican Library behind doors, few have entered, and fewer still have truly understood lie scrolls and sketches that history never told you about. Among them, some say, are the forbidden mechanical diagrams of Leonardo da Vinci. To the world, da Vinci is known as the great painter of the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, a man of sublime artistic genius. But in his private notebooks, many of which vanished after his death, he was something more, a visionary engineer, a man centuries ahead of his time. He drew flying machines with bird-like wings, tanks with rotating cannons, self-propelling carts, hydraulic pumps, and even what looked like humanoid automatons, robots, before the word existed. But here's the strange part. Some of these designs never surfaced in public collections. Instead, scattered records suggest that in the 17th century, a collection of mechanical manuscripts, believed to have belonged to da Vinci, was transferred from the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan to Rome, and quietly entered the restricted archives of the Vatican. Why? Some say the Church feared the implications of such technology. During da Vinci's life, invention wasn't just curiosity, it was power. And in a time when the Church struggled to control both science and spirit, designs that blurred the line between man and machine were deeply unsettling. Automata that mimicked life, vehicles that moved without horses, wings that gave man the illusion of flight. To some, these were glimpses of divine genius, but to others, they were echoes of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. What if da Vinci had discovered a form of kinetic transfer that mimicked perpetual motion, or harnessed anatomy so precisely that it threatened theological explanations of the soul? And what if some of those diagrams, especially those touching on flight consciousness or non-combustion power, were deemed too dangerous for a world not yet ready? Documents recovered in the 20th century, like Codex Atlanticus and Codex Leicester, show only a fraction of da Vinci's mechanical vision. The rest, some scholars whisper, are buried deep beneath Vatican stone, uncatalogued, untranslated. A few decrypted footnotes from 19th century Jesuit scholars even reference machines that echo the pulse of man yet lack breath of the soul. Could this be a reference to da Vinci's rumored android knight, an articulated suit of armor capable of sitting, standing, moving its arms, and even opening its jaw? Or was there more? One 1883 inventory log from the Vatican Secret Archive lists an item as Ingegneria Animata, Schema Incompleta. Animated engineering, incomplete schema. No drawing is attached, no further detail is given. But if such devices exist, and if they are indeed inspired by Da Vinci, then we must ask, why was the greatest polymath in history not remembered for these inventions? Why did the Vatican keep silent about them? Was it fear or something else? Perhaps in a world on the edge of scientific awakening, it was simply too soon to reveal that one man, 5 centuries ago, had already mapped the skeleton of the future. And perhaps he drew it in secret, knowing that only a time of greater wisdom could receive it without fear. The hidden records of alien biology, secret files inside the Vatican. But what if mechanical designs weren't the only thing buried beneath Vatican stone? What if, deep within its forbidden chambers, the Church preserved something even more radical, records not of this world? For centuries, the Vatican has claimed to be the guardian of sacred knowledge. But according to whispered testimonies from insiders, independent researchers, and a handful of defiant clergy, there may be a hidden department operating under layers of secrecy. A section allegedly referred to as Archivum Arcana Celestia, the Archive of Heavenly Mysteries. Within its walls, biological reports, drawings, comparative studies, not of angels or demons, but of non-human beings. Entities some believe to be extraterrestrial. It sounds like science fiction, but when journalist Roberto Pinotti claimed in the 1990s that Italian military and church authorities had long maintained classified contact protocols for unidentified aerial phenomena, few took him seriously. Until documents surfaced showing that the Vatican Observatory, one of the oldest astronomical institutions in the world, had funded research not only into cosmic rays and exoplanets, but into anomalous biological matter allegedly retrieved from crash sites. One of these documents, kept in microfilm format and dated 1957, reportedly describes organic cellular patterns not consistent with terrestrial taxonomy, presence of bilateral symmetry, yet absence of carbon-based respiratory chain. In simpler terms, a living tissue sample, not from Earth. And then there's the testimony of a former Swiss guard who, under anonymity, claimed to have once escorted a briefcase belonging to a Monsignor. Inside, sealed files stamped Classificato, Occhi Solo Vescovi Classified, Bishop's Eyes Only. The label Specimen E, Type Sanguinis Unc, Type Unknown Blood. Is this merely fiction? A conspiracy crafted by imaginative minds? Or could it be that the Church, rather than fearing the existence of life beyond Earth, had already confirmed it, and perhaps more disturbingly, could this explain why theological definitions of creation have remained untouched, even in the face of mounting scientific discoveries? What if those definitions were already expanded internally, but the world wasn't ready to hear it? In ancient times, the word angelos meant messenger, but the descriptions in apocryphal texts, shining beings descending in fire, giving knowledge and departing into the sky, sound less like winged humans and more like visitors. The Book of Enoch spoke of watchers descending from the heavens. Ezekiel described wheels of fire. Even the Vatican itself employs a telescope named Lucifer, a real infrared system in Arizona aimed not downward, but up. Could the truth be that what we call alien today was once simply called divine, and that the biology of these messengers, be it DNA structure or consciousness, has already been studied in secret? Perhaps that's why the Vatican has kept silent, not out of denial, but out of awe or fear. Because if it were true, it wouldn't just rewrite science. It would reframe everything we believe about God, the soul, and what it means to be human. And if that truth is ever released, not by a government, but from within the most ancient spiritual institution in the world, it may just change everything. The 7 Archangels, ancient teachings on the forbidden angelic hierarchy. For centuries, the names of 7 archangels have been whispered in apocryphal texts, illuminated in forgotten scrolls, and scratched into the margins of codices never meant for public eyes. Unlike the common teachings of modern Christianity, which often only acknowledge Michael and Gabriel, these ancient records spoke of a complete celestial system. 7 radiant beings who stood closest to the divine throne, each presiding over vast dominions of creation. Yet their names and the roles they played in the architecture of heaven were quietly erased from mainstream doctrine. Why? And why are references to them still sealed in the private vaults of the Vatican Library, known only to a handful of initiated scholars? The roots of the 7 archangels trace back to Jewish mysticism, particularly in texts like the Book of Enoch, the Testament of Solomon, and early Kabbalistic writings. They appear not as symbolic metaphors, but as living intelligences, each with a purpose: Michael the warrior, Gabriel the messenger, Raphael the healer, Uriel the watcher of time and stars, Raguel the harmonizer of the heavens, Sariel the guide of souls, and Remiel the awakener of those who sleep. These were not merely divine agents, they were the very scaffolding of divine order. In the early centuries of Christianity, these names were preserved in Eastern traditions and certain Gnostic circles. Churches in Armenia, Ethiopia, and Syria maintained records of their functions, reciting their names in liturgy and invoking their blessings in daily life. But as the Roman Church centralized its doctrine during councils like Nicaea and Trent, these angelic names were condemned as unverified, and all references outside of canonical texts were expunged. The deeper layers of angelology, those that describe the complex interaction between celestial orders and human fate, were deemed too speculative, even dangerous. What remains today are traces, frescoes hidden beneath centuries of plaster manuscripts, labeled apocryphal and exiled from teaching pulpits, and private correspondences between popes and mystics that speak of dreams and visions too vivid to be symbolic. In one such letter attributed to Pope Sylvester II in the 10th century, he describes being visited by an entity cloaked in starlight, who named all 7 archangels and showed him a great wheel of fire inscribed with the destinies of empires. The Vatican, for its part, has never publicly denied the existence of these texts, but it has never confirmed them either. In the index Librorum Prohibitorum, the infamous list of banned books, several works on the angelic hierarchy are listed simply as non licet docere, not permitted to teach. Among them is a mysterious volume titled De Septem Flammis Dei, on the 7 flames of God. Only one known copy survives, held deep within the restricted vaults beneath St. Peter's Basilica. According to leaked inventory records, the book is bound in blackened calfskin and sealed with 7 golden clasps, each bearing the sigil of one archangel. Why was this knowledge forbidden? Perhaps because it offered too much clarity. The 7 archangels were said to govern not just the heavens, but the cycles of history, the rise and fall of civilizations, the transformation of souls. To know their names, their functions, and how to invoke their assistance was to touch the machinery of fate itself. And that, to a church preoccupied with earthly power, was a dangerous proposition. Even so, stories persist. In the hills of southern France, in the catacombs of Malta, in the ruins of pre-Christian temples converted into monasteries, symbols of the 7 archangels appear: 7 rays, 7 stars, 7 flames. In visions reported by mystics across centuries, the same patterns emerge, often unprompted, often by those who had never heard of the hierarchy. Could it be that the knowledge once seeded into human consciousness cannot be entirely erased? Today, the study of the 7 archangels is re-emerging not as dogma, but as spiritual inquiry. Across continents, seekers turn to the old names with reverence to Uriel, when seeking truth, to Raphael, when in need of healing, to Remiel, when facing loss. And perhaps in this quiet return, the original intention is fulfilled, not to control or institutionalize divine order, but to remember that heaven once spoke clearly to humankind, and that its voices were many, and perhaps still are. Codex Arcanum, records of half-human, half-divine beings. If you believe that libraries merely house theological texts and traditional manuscripts, the Vatican may compel you to think again. Hidden deep within the cold stone vaults and shadowy corridors of the Vatican's secret archives lies a mysterious document known only by its code name, Codex Arcanum, the Manuscript of Mysteries. This is not an official title, but one given by modern scholars to a scattered collection of writings inscribed in ancient Greek, Latin, and Syriac. There is no known author, no dates, only strings of anonymous symbols used as an internal cataloging system. What sets it apart is this: the records do not discuss doctrine. They do not reference the Bible. Instead, they read like recollections at times, even confessions from people who lived in distant centuries and claim to have encountered beings we now speak of only in myth. Giants who could fly, children of light, beings from the lower heavens. No one knows whether these are allegories or forgotten truths. But throughout the dozens of pages, a recurring motif emerges. Creatures that resemble humans, but are taller, stronger, and radiant in the dark. They lived in seclusion, appearing only during eras of chaos and vanishing again when a divine force referred to as He who dwells in the heights punished humanity with a great flood. One passage states, "We called them Nephilim, but they told us their name was Azara, not of the high heavens, nor of the lower earth. They come from the meeting point between two realms where light bends and sound carries wisdom." These lines appear sporadically, often blurred, scorched, or scraped away. Yet one of the most striking elements is an ancient diagram drawn in graphite on calfskin parchment depicting 7 layers of heaven, each inhabited by winged entities. Beside the 3rd level is an illustration of lion-headed beings with human torsos, each holding a glowing ring and descending from a spiral gate. On the 6th level is an inscription, "The children of light carriers of the seed of life and the teachings never declared." According to a marginal note, this diagram was copied from a lost Mesopotamian scroll acquired by a Benedictine monk in the 13th century. The original source remains unknown. Scholars who have examined the Codex Arcanum are consistently baffled. It aligns with no known theological framework. Instead, it blends fragments of Sumerian mythology, Jewish Kabbalah, and Hindu cosmology. Yet it was meticulously preserved, annotated, and sealed by the highest ranks of the Vatican. Why would an Orthodox church safeguard such a manuscript? Could it be that the Vatican once held knowledge of an alternative history, one in which half-divine beings not only existed, but left behind a legacy? Some researchers even suggest this may be one of the oldest surviving pieces of evidence for a pre-Adamic civilization. A civilization where flight-light manipulation and coexistence with early humans were not science fiction, but reality. One passage reads, "On the day they departed, the sky burned crimson. A doorway opened in the air, and light soaked into our souls. They gave no farewell, but left behind a promise: when earth enters darkness once more, they shall return." Perhaps these are poetic flourishes. Perhaps fragments of forgotten Babylonian hymns. But we cannot ignore the possibility that amid centuries of guarding humanity's greatest secrets, the Vatican may have hidden a truth far larger than history itself. That humans were never the only sentient beings on Earth. And that the flying giants, the children of light, the beings from lower heavens, may very well be the missing pieces in the story of our origin. And perhaps to protect records like the Codex Arcanum from the light of public scrutiny from the probing eyes of modern science or political powers, Vatican needed something more than just religious authority, a fortress beyond reach, a sovereign land untouched by any earthly government. And so, in the year 1929, the Lateran Treaty was born, marking the moment when the Vatican officially became a nation. But what truly happened behind the curtains of that historic agreement? Let us continue the journey to uncover it. The Lateran Treaty of 1929, when the Vatican became a sovereign state. For centuries, the Vatican stood at the heart of Christendom, revered as the spiritual compass of the Western world. But beneath the prayers, rituals, and hymns of the faithful lay a quieter battle, one not fought with swords, but with ink borders and political will. The Vatican, once a sprawling papal state with land armies and influence, had lost its temporal power in the 19th century when Italy was unified. Rome was seized in 1870, and for nearly 60 years the Pope considered himself a prisoner in the Vatican, refusing to recognize the legitimacy of the Italian state. Behind the scenes, however, something deeper stirred. Without sovereignty, the Holy See lacked not only physical protection, but also the legal shield necessary to safeguard its greatest treasures, those not made of gold, but of ink and parchment. Ancient manuscripts, forbidden books, esoteric maps, prophecies, things not meant for the world to see, and perhaps things too powerful for the world to hold. On February 11th, 1929, that stalemate ended. A deal was struck between Pope Pius XI and Benito Mussolini, the then leader of fascist Italy. It was known as the Lateran Treaty. With a few strokes of a pen, the Vatican became the smallest independent nation in the world, just over 44 hectares of sacred land walled within Rome. But those walls now enclosed more than basilicas and gardens. They enclosed immunity, sovereignty, silence. The Lateran Treaty granted the Holy See full diplomatic recognition. It could send and receive ambassadors. It could mint its own currency, issue passports, run its own postal service, and most importantly, govern its internal affairs without interference. Vatican archives, long suspected of containing suppressed texts and historical revelations, were now officially beyond the reach of any court or government on earth. Hidden beneath the Apostolic Palace, beneath the Sistine Chapel, beneath centuries of marble and stone were vaults that would now remain untouched by external law. The secret archives, now called the Vatican Apostolic Archives, were sealed tighter than ever. Their contents, unknown even to many cardinals. Among them, some whisper lie fragments of banned Gospels, alternative Genesis accounts, astronomical diagrams banned by the Inquisition, and codices like the Codex Arcanum describing beings not of this world. Was the Lateran Treaty just a political agreement? Or was it a veil drawn across centuries of hidden knowledge? Historians will say it was a necessary resolution of a decades-long conflict. But esoteric scholars see something more. They point to the years that followed the quiet expansion of Vatican observatories, the sudden interest in non-canonical texts, and the meticulous cataloging of relics previously dismissed as legend. It's as if the Vatican, now protected, had begun preparing for something, or safeguarding something, or perhaps both. And so 1929 did not simply birth a nation. It birthed a fortress, one where time moves differently, where history is preserved in hushed tones and where knowledge sleeps under lock and key. But no lock is eternal, no key is forever lost. And as we journey deeper into the secrets of the Vatican, we begin to see a pattern of knowledge hidden not out of malice, but perhaps out of mercy. Of truths too vast, too luminous, too disquieting for the world to bear all at once. And with that, we now turn the next page toward the origin of this power, the foundation of secrecy, and the mystery behind why certain truths are forbidden to be told. Coming next, the Jesuit Order and the Lost Keys of Solomon. A tale of alchemy, prophecy, and a secret that may bind the Vatican to the very origins of science and sorcery. The Vatican and the Nazis, the buried files of a shadow alliance. History as we know it is often shaped by what is remembered, but sometimes its true shape lies hidden in what has been deliberately forgotten. Among the most controversial and enduring shadows cast over the 20th century is the question, what exactly was the relationship between the Vatican and Nazi Germany? Official records, public speeches, and post-war statements suggest a church caught between morality and survival, condemning evil where it could, sheltering the innocent where it dared. But in the sealed vaults of the Vatican Apostolic Archives lie pages that tell another version of events. pages marked Privato, pages that for decades have been denied access even to most scholars. To understand this secret chapter, we must go back to 1933. That was the year the Vatican signed the Reichskonkordat with Adolf Hitler's regime, a concordat intended to protect the rights of the Catholic Church in Germany. In theory, it was a legal agreement, but in practice, it gave Hitler legitimacy on the international stage. The Vatican was the first sovereign entity to recognize Nazi Germany diplomatically, and that some argue was the first silent nod. Behind closed doors, cardinals debated the rise of fascism with unease. Some saw Hitler as a madman. Others saw him as a necessary evil one who might help suppress communism and preserve Christian Europe from atheist ideologies. But perhaps the most chilling documents are the memoranda stored in the Vatican's German Affairs Division. Telegrams from bishops, internal reports, private letters exchanged between SS officers and clergy, all suggesting a complex web of cooperation, compromise, and calculated silence. In one recovered communication, only declassified in recent years, a Vatican envoy writes, "Our priority must be to preserve the Church's position. The storm will pass. Better to anchor the faith than to sink with the political tides." Was this prudence or complicity? The archives also contain references to something far more secretive, the rat lines. These were escape routes, allegedly coordinated by certain clergy, that helped high-ranking Nazi officers flee to South America after the war. Most famously, Argentina and Brazil. While the Vatican has never officially admitted to these operations, several testimonies and declassified CIA documents point to priests and monasteries providing false identities, transport papers, and safe passage, often under the pretense of charity or mission work. One such figure, Bishop Alois Dudael, was later revealed to have openly supported Nazi ideology. His writings, now stored in a restricted wing of the Vatican archives, speak of a coming Christian renewal and the need to protect Europe from Judeo-Bolshevik corruption. These are not fringe voices. These were men in robes wearing crosses, guiding souls on Sundays, and perhaps shepherding fugitives on Mondays. And yet, not all within the Vatican agreed. Some voices did speak out. Pope Pius XII has remained a subject of endless historical debate. Was he Hitler's pope, as some critics claim, or a silent diplomat working behind the scenes to save Jewish lives? Newly released files from 2020 include correspondence between the Vatican and resistance networks' efforts to hide Jews in churches and urgent appeals to halt deportations. But the question remains, why was it all hidden for so long? Some believe the silence was a shield to protect the Church's image during a fragile post-war period. Others believe it was to protect truths that would shake the faithful to their core. For in those same archives are records of Jewish children baptized in hiding, then never returned to their families. Monasteries holding looted art from Poland, Ukraine, and France. Priests who held confessions from Nazi officers and never spoke even when they knew where bodies were buried. And so the story is not one of black and white. It is a tapestry of gray woven from fear, ambition, and the struggle to do what is right in a world that had lost its way. Today, the Vatican continues to slowly open its World War II-era archives to historians. But many suspect the most sensitive files marked with code words and ciphered indices will never see the light of day, not because they are false, but because they are too true. And in that silence, the world is left to wonder. What else lies buried beneath St. Peter's dome? What other stories remain sealed, not in denial, but in dread of what they would reveal? As we move forward, our next chapter will take us into another realm of secrecy. The Jesuit Order and the Lost Keys of Solomon. A hidden science of divine power. A tale of cryptic symbols, sacred geometry, and the forbidden wisdom that once linked the Church with the stars. Pope Pius XII and the silence. During the Holocaust, a question that still echoes. He was called the Pope of Peace. But in one of the darkest chapters of human history, his silence became the loudest sound of all. Eugenio Pacelli, later known as Pope Pius XII, ascended the papal throne in 1939, just months before Hitler's invasion of Poland plunged the world into war. A deeply intellectual man, fluent in multiple languages and with a long history as the Vatican's Secretary of State, Pius XII was no stranger to diplomacy. But as the machinery of genocide began to turn across Europe, the question remains, why did the Vicar of Christ choose not to speak? At first, the Vatican remained officially neutral. Pius XII, it is said, feared that public condemnation of the Nazis might provoke even harsher retaliation, not only against Jews, but against Catholics living under Axis rule. His defenders argue that he worked tirelessly behind the scenes, sending aid, instructing churches to offer refuge, and pleading with diplomats to intervene. Indeed, some Jewish leaders after the war, including Golda Meir and Israel Zoli, the former chief rabbi of Rome, praised the Pope's covert efforts. Churches across Italy, France, and Hungary did shelter thousands of Jews. But the official voice of the Catholic Church, heard in encyclicals, radio broadcasts, and public addresses, remained cautious, veiled, and often silent. No excommunication of Nazi leaders, no direct naming of Hitler, no encyclical devoted solely to the Holocaust. And while millions were being herded into ghettos, loaded onto trains, and burned in gas chambers, the silence from St. Peter's Basilica grew deafening. In 1942, on Christmas Eve, Pius XII gave a radio message referencing the hundreds of thousands who, without any fault, sometimes only for reasons of nationality or race, are marked down for death. It was a veiled reference to the Jews. But was it enough? Could more have been said? Should more have been said by the spiritual leader of over 300 million Catholics? The Vatican's defenders point to secrecy caution, the risk of backlash. They argue that his silence was strategic, that lives were saved precisely because he did not provoke open confrontation. But his critics, historians, survivors, theologians, ask a different question. What is the role of a moral authority if not to speak when the world is drowning in sin? In the sealed archives of the Vatican files, long hidden, are slowly being made public. They include detailed memos sent to the Papal Palace describing the horrors in Poland and Ukraine, first-hand accounts of mass shootings, deportations, and extermination. These were not rumors. They were testimonies delivered directly to the heart of Christendom. And yet, no papal bull, no outcry from the pulpit of Rome. Instead, diplomatic restraint. In one recovered note dated 1943, a Vatican official writes, "His Holiness must weigh every word as if it were a blade. To speak too soon may close every door. To speak too late may let history pass in silence." Today, scholars debate whether Pius XII did what he could or failed in the greatest test of conscience. Some view him as a quiet hero, others as a bystander draped in white. But the real legacy may not lie in judgment. It lies in remembrance. Because history does not forget silence, it records it. And in the echoes of that silence, we must decide what kind of courage we expect from those who speak for the divine. In the next chapter, we turn from silence to secrecy into a world where the voice of knowledge was not ignored, but deliberately hidden. The Jesuit order and the lost keys of Solomon. A hidden science of divine power, unlocking a forgotten blend of mysticism, astronomy, and sacred mathematics, once guarded by the Church's most secretive order. The secret files of exorcism. How many cases has the Vatican hidden? Behind the imposing walls of the Vatican lies not just one of the oldest spiritual institutions on earth, but a fortress of secrets, many of which the world was never meant to see. Among them, few are as unsettling, mysterious, and fiercely guarded as the archives related to exorcism, the ancient rite of expelling demons from the human body. While popular culture often sensationalizes exorcism through films and horror fiction, the reality buried beneath centuries of Vatican records is far stranger. Hidden in classified files within the congregation, For the doctrine of the faith, the Vatican's oldest and most secretive body, are reports detailing thousands of exorcisms carried out over the last 1700 years. Many of these cases never made it into the light of day, sealed under papal authority or written in obscure dialects only a handful of priests can interpret. Some accounts are disturbing transcripts of voices speaking in languages the possessed never learned: ancient Aramaic, Sumerian chants, words of long-lost cults. Other cases speak of individuals levitating, convulsing in unnatural ways, or knowing intimate secrets about the priests performing the rite. These weren't tales whispered in dark corners. They were formally documented with witnesses, including bishops, doctors, and even police officers. One such file, referenced anonymously in a Jesuit publication in the 1970s, described a young girl in northern Italy who had no prior religious training, yet recited entire apocryphal psalms in perfect Greek, a language she never studied. The Vatican reportedly sent 3 of its most experienced exorcists. The ritual took 18 months. She survived. But the file ends with a cryptic line. Though the girl was freed, the room remains unnaturally cold. Vatican insiders claim that less than 10% of exorcisms are ever officially acknowledged. The rest are quietly handled, especially if they involve outcomes that defy theological or scientific understanding. Some priests report entity transfers, when the spirit leaves one person only to attach itself to someone else in the room. Others tell of voices taunting them with personal sins, sins no human should know. Why so much secrecy? The Church says it is to protect the dignity and privacy of the afflicted. But some theologians suspect more that the true nature of evil, its manifestations, and the spiritual war between light and dark is far more complex than the public is prepared to accept. A few even believe that certain cases revealed metaphysical truths incompatible with current doctrine, raising questions about free will, karma, or reincarnation concepts the Church traditionally avoids. There are also stories scattered and unconfirmed about exorcisms that went too far. Priests who lost their minds, victims who didn't survive, rooms that were never used again, places where even today visitors report strange feelings, electrical disturbances, or visions during prayer. Some of the oldest exorcism manuals, dating back to the 9th century, are still kept under lock and key in the Vatican Apostolic Archive, accessible only by papal permission. These texts include forbidden prayers, symbolic seals, and descriptions of demons no longer listed in public demonology. They describe beings that do not merely possess, but anchor themselves to bloodlines, ancient objects, or even entire locations. And here lies the chilling thought. If these manuals are preserved so carefully updated, rewritten, and translated over centuries, could it be that the Church still battles these entities today behind closed doors? In recent years, the Vatican has officially recognized a sharp rise in exorcism requests worldwide. It has trained more exorcists. It has reissued revised guidelines. But it has never fully revealed what it knows, because perhaps to do so would force humanity to admit there are things out there that still fear only one name. And what if those things are not only real, but active? As we close this section, remember the rites of exorcism are not remnants of medieval superstition. They are living, breathing tools, still used, still hidden, still feared within the world's most guarded religious empire. The Vatican Necropolis, the city of the dead beneath the Basilica. Hidden beneath the splendor of St. Peter's Basilica, where light filters softly through gilded domes and prayers echo off marble walls, lies a world no tourist sees in full. A place older than the Basilica itself. A place not of saints and sermons, but of silence and stone. They call it the Vatican Necropolis, the city of the dead. To walk through its underground corridors is to step into the very foundation of Christian memory, built not just upon history, but upon graves. Just meters below the altar where the Pope leads Mass, where cardinals kneel in red and incense coils like mist, lies a series of tombs carved in the Roman era. Among them, it is believed rests the body of the man to whom Jesus said, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." Yes, this is where St. Peter himself is said to be buried. Long before the construction of the Basilica in the 4th century, this area was a pagan necropolis, rows of mausoleums, where wealthy Roman families laid their dead to rest. Covered by centuries of construction forgotten beneath layers of ecclesiastical ambition, it wasn't until the 1940s that this buried city began to resurface. The excavation was conducted in secret, ordered by Pope Pius XII, and lasted more than a decade, far from the public eye. What they found stunned even the most seasoned archaeologists: exquisitely preserved tombs, painted ceilings, Greek inscriptions, and most importantly, a humble grave marked with the word Petros Eni. Peter is here. Nearby, they discovered bones belonging to a man in his 60s, consistent with the apostle's age at the time of his martyrdom. These remains had been wrapped in purple and gold cloth, a sign of reverence beyond Roman tradition. But the story doesn't end there. Why was this discovery kept secret for so long? Why even today do only select pilgrims after special approval gain access to the Vatican necropolis? Some scholars suggest it's to protect the sanctity of the site. Others believe it's because certain inscriptions found on the walls complicate the official narrative texts that speak of ancient rites, pre-Christian worship, and even symbols associated with Mithras, the Persian god of light, whose cult once rivaled early Christianity. There are also whispers rarely published of unexplained phenomena in the necropolis: strange temperature shifts, flickering lights in closed chambers, and even accounts from guards who refused to descend after midnight. Of course, these are only rumors, but in a place where the living walk above the dead, and where the foundation of a global faith literally rests on a grave, such stories find fertile ground. What makes the Vatican necropolis so haunting is not just its age, but its intimacy. These aren't just names etched in Latin. They are echoes, parents and children, priests and philosophers whose lives ended centuries ago, but whose presence is still felt in the cold air and quiet hush of the tombs. And as we stand above, amid the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica, perhaps we should remember every cathedral casts a shadow, and beneath every altar may lie a deeper truth. The resurrection, the UFO hidden in the sky, in the heart of the Vatican museums, where marble floors echo the footsteps of pilgrims and scholars alike, lies a painting that has quietly unsettled the minds of those who take the time to look closer. It is not as grand as Michelangelo's frescoes, nor as instantly recognizable as Da Vinci's works. And yet, it may hold one of the most curious secrets hidden in plain sight. Painted by the lesser-known Renaissance artist Ventura Salimbeni in 1595, the Resurrection of Christ depicts the triumphant moment when Jesus rises from the dead, his hands raised, flanked by the soldiers of Rome, with divine light cascading around him. But hovering just above Christ in the celestial space, where one might expect to find clouds or rays of heavenly light, there is something else. A perfect metallic orb, not a halo, not a symbol of divine glory, but a silvery sphere with symmetrical antennas, rivets, and a gleaming surface that appears almost mechanical. It is shaded with careful strokes of light and shadow, suggesting not a vision, but an object, real, solid, tangible. One that resembles strikingly so the satellites and spacecraft humanity would not invent for another 360 years. How could such an object appear in a painting from the 16th century? Official Vatican art historians have long maintained that the object is a symbolic globe of creation, representing the cosmos under the dominion of God the Father and Christ. Some argue it is a stylized depiction of the celestial firmament or the spherical heaven described in medieval cosmology. But these interpretations often fall apart under closer scrutiny. Because what sphere of divine authority has antennae? Because what orb of celestial theology reflects light like polished steel? To modern eyes, and even to Renaissance scholars familiar with geometry astronomy, and esoteric philosophy. The object looks like a man-made machine, a satellite, a flying mechanism, something that should not exist in 1595, unless it was remembered from something older. Some researchers suggest that Ventura Salimbeni, who was known to frequent Jesuit circles and had access to manuscripts from ancient Greece and the Middle East, may have encountered stories or even sketches of flying machines. Leonardo da Vinci had already filled his notebooks with futuristic diagrams by then. But this was not da Vinci's style of conceptual engineering. This was religious art, which makes the inclusion of such a modern-looking object all the more suspicious or intentional. What if Salimbeni was subtly revealing something he had learned, something forbidden to express directly? Could this painting be his way of embedding a message into the visual language of theology? The Vatican, which owns and displays the painting, offers no comment beyond standard art catalog descriptions. There are no placards questioning the object, no labels suggesting its anomaly. It simply hangs there quietly in room 7 of the Pinacoteca, as it has for decades. And yet, it is not alone. Other Renaissance and medieval artworks, many of which are also housed in the Vatican or nearby European cathedrals, depict similarly strange objects in the sky, shining discs emitting beams of light, orb-shaped craft trailing smoke, even humanoid figures seated within luminous vessels. These are often dismissed as metaphors. But metaphors for what? Why do they appear only in certain artworks and in specific centuries? And why is it that the Vatican, guardian of the largest collection of ancient texts and sacred art in the world, has never offered a definitive explanation? Some believe the truth lies buried deep within the Vatican's secret archives, that somewhere beneath the marble floors and sealed vaults are records of ancient encounters between man and messengers from the sky, that were interpreted in the language of religion, encoded into art, and then quietly forgotten. The resurrection may be one such encoding, a cosmic whisper painted onto canvas, a symbol not of dogma, but of memory. And if that memory is true, what else have we forgotten? As we stand before this quiet anomaly, this orb above Christ's haloed head, we are not just looking at paint and brushwork. We are looking at a question, one that Vatican scholars dare not answer, one that lingers in the silence of the museum, in the cool air of the corridor, waiting for someone to ask, what else is hidden in plain sight? And so, from celestial spheres, we descend once more into darker vaults, where leather-bound volumes speak of rituals, voices, and spirits unseen. Pope John III and the encounter with a being of light, the 1961 Vatican secret. In the quiet halls of the Vatican, where marble saints watch in silence and centuries-old secrets rest behind sealed doors, there lingers a tale so extraordinary that it defies theology, science, and history all at once. It is said that in the summer of 1961, Pope John III, the beloved pontiff known for his compassion and sweeping reforms, walked alone in the gardens of Castel Gandolfo, the papal summer residence nestled in the hills outside Rome. The air was still, the sky painted in twilight. But what happened next would be whispered only in Vatican corridors, buried under layers of secrecy and denials. According to a leaked document allegedly from the personal writings of Loris Capovilla, the Pope's closest aide, John XXIII, paused as a glowing object descended from the sky. Not a vision, not a dream. A physical craft, circular and radiant, touched down silently on the grass. From it emerged a being, tall, luminous humanoid in form and radiating an otherworldly calm. And the Pope did not run. He stepped forward, raised his hand in greeting, and according to the record, spoke gently to the celestial visitor in what was described as a dialogue beyond language. No fear, no spectacle. Just two beings, one from Earth, one not meeting in a garden under God's sky. The encounter lasted 20 minutes. Capovilla, who reportedly witnessed the moment from a distance, would later write, "The Holy Father knew who he was meeting. Not of this world, but not a threat." There was understanding, recognition, as if they had met before. But what did they say? And why has the Vatican never spoken of it? Officially, the Catholic Church remains silent on the matter. The document was never authenticated. The eyewitness account has never been publicly confirmed. And yet, the rumor persisted, growing in the shadows, like ivy over old stone. Some say the visitor was an angel, appearing not with wings, but as a form of radiant intelligence, echoing descriptions found in ancient scripture and mystical texts. Others believe it was a being from another world, arriving not as conqueror or curiosity, but as a messenger in a language only the soul could understand. What is certain is this: just 2 years after the alleged encounter, Pope John XXIII would pass away. And in the years since, the Vatican has refused to comment on the story, neither confirming nor denying its truth. But those who study esoteric Vatican lore point to subtle shifts in the Church's tone after 1961. A new openness to dialogue, to global unity, to the idea that humanity is not alone in the universe. In his final days, John XXIII was said to repeat a cryptic phrase: "The children of the stars are closer than we think." Was it metaphor or memory? And if such an encounter truly happened, what else might the Vatican know about beings not of this earth? From the shadows of the papal gardens to the sealed archives beneath St. Peter's, the question lingers like incense in an empty chapel. Perhaps, just perhaps, the line between divine messengers and celestial visitors has always been thinner than we imagined. The suppressed files on the Knights of Malta and the Vatican Bank, hidden alliances and silent fortune. Beneath the solemn prayers and marble silence of the Vatican lies a financial empire few truly understand. For decades, rumors have swirled not just of secret chambers and ancient texts, but of clandestine transactions, hidden accounts, and shadow networks that tie the Church to something far more temporal: power, money, and secrecy. One of the most enigmatic entities involved in this web is the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, better known as the Knights of Malta. Though publicly recognized as a religious order committed to charity and humanitarian work, the Knights are also a sovereign body with diplomatic immunity, their own passports, currency, and even observer status at the United Nations. But behind the veil of noble service, their name has been whispered in corridors of political strategy, Cold War espionage, and most controversially, banking. Documents long suspected, but never officially acknowledged, hint at a troubling alliance. During the 1980s, the Vatican Bank, officially known as the Institute for the Works of Religion, was implicated in a massive scandal involving the collapse of Banco Ambrosiano, one of Italy's largest private banks. Its chairman, Roberto Calvi, was found hanging under Blackfriars Bridge in London. His pockets were filled with bricks. His death officially ruled a murder, but never solved. Calvi was often referred to as God's banker, due to his close ties to the Vatican, and investigators discovered a network of offshore shell companies tied to both the Vatican Bank and the Knights of Malta. Declassified financial records and anonymous testimonies from within the Vatican suggest that certain funds were rerouted through the Knights' diplomatic channels outside the scope of Italian oversight. Why? Some theorize it was to fund covert anti-communist operations during the Cold War. Others suggest it was part of a broader effort to build a financial reserve independent of international regulations, accessible only to those in the inner circle. The deeper one looks, the more tangled the web becomes. Who really controls these silent fortunes? And why have several former investigators, whistleblowers, and even clerics died under strange circumstances? Car crashes, sudden illnesses, disappearances. More disturbing is the revelation of Index V4, a term found in a leaked ledger believed to be part of a Vatican internal audit. It lists dozens of unnamed accounts, many of which trace back to Knight-affiliated front organizations. These accounts do not appear in any public financial statements, yet they reportedly move millions annually. The ledger contains only one cryptic note beside the final entry, "Custodians of the Temporal Throne." Is this merely the work of conspiracy theorists weaving fiction into faith? Or has the Vatican, an institution founded on spiritual purity, long since entangled itself in global economic intrigue through channels most believers will never hear about? As with many things behind Vatican walls, the answers may lie buried under centuries of secrecy. And if the Knights of Malta have indeed played the role of invisible financiers and silent strategists, then the Vatican Bank is not just a religious institution, it is a throne of gold guarded by shadows. The vanishing history of Pope Joan. Did the Vatican erase a woman who sat on the throne of St. Peter? There is a name that once echoed through medieval Europe, but today it is little more than a whisper buried in silence. Pope Joan, a woman who, according to numerous chronicles and oral accounts, once ascended. The papal throne ruled for several years and then vanished from official history. Erased not by death, but by design. The legend begins in the 9th century in a time of cloistered monasteries and strict male dominance within the church. It tells of a gifted young woman, her name uncertain though, some say Joan or Johanna, who disguised herself as a man and entered monastic life under the name John of Mainz. Her intelligence, eloquence, and deep knowledge of theology earned her rapid promotions within the church. Eventually, she rose so high in the ecclesiastical ranks that, according to the tales, she was elected pope unknowingly by those around her. Her reign, though brief, was said to be wise and deeply admired. But her secret could not remain hidden forever. The turning point came during a public procession between the Lateran Palace and the Basilica of St. Clement. Overcome with pain, she collapsed on the street and, to the horror of all present, gave birth. A pope in labor, a woman in the seat of St. Peter. The betrayal of centuries of doctrine exposed on the cobblestones of Rome. Accounts diverge after that moment. Some say she and the newborn were stoned to death on the spot by a furious mob. Others claim she was quietly exiled to a convent, her child taken, and her name struck from all records. In either case, her name was purged from the Liber Pontificalis, the official list of popes. Statues were removed, chronicles were edited, and the church would never officially acknowledge her existence again. Yet for centuries after, clues lingered. In medieval Rome, travelers reported a peculiar statue labeled Papessa, the female pope, located on the road where Joan supposedly gave birth. A papal ceremony was also said to have altered its route for centuries to avoid that very street. Even the pierced chair used in later papal enthronement rituals, a marble seat with a hole in the middle, was rumored to be introduced afterward, meant to discreetly verify the gender of future popes. Theologians argue that Pope Joan is nothing more than a legend, a moral tale spun from anti-Catholic sentiment or medieval satire. Yet historians continue to uncover documents and marginal notations in monastic texts that hint at deliberate redactions. Manuscripts from the 13th and 14th centuries openly reference her, even as official church histories grew ever more silent. Why such effort to erase her memory? Was it to protect the sanctity of apostolic succession, to uphold the image of divine masculinity tied to the papal office? Or perhaps most simply because she had proven the unthinkable, that a woman hidden behind robes and wisdom could lead the greatest church on earth. And if such a story could be erased, how many others have we never heard? The Vatican has never issued a definitive statement on Pope Joan's existence. But in the silence of its archives, some believe her name still lingers in torn pages, in erased margins, in the shadows between truth and control. The Journal of Father Lucio, a man who claimed to be the reincarnation of Enoch. Tucked away in a forgotten drawer of a Jesuit archive in southern Italy, a dusty leather-bound notebook surfaced, one that, according to whispers within the church, should never have been found. Its author, a 20th century priest named Father Lucio di Ferrara. Its contents: a shocking account of visions, voices, and a personal declaration that would shake the foundations of Christian theology. I am Enoch. I have returned. Father Lucio was not a well-known name. He was a reclusive scholar of ancient languages, stationed for years in a rural monastery near Naples. But those who knew him described an intensity behind his gaze, like he carried memories too old to belong to this lifetime. According to the journal, it all began in 1963, when he claimed to have received a visitation from a being of blinding light who called himself Uriel, the Archangel of Wisdom and the keeper of the heavenly books. The journal reads more like a transmission than a diary. In carefully inked Latin, Greek, and early Italian, Lucio described the angel, revealing to him the chambers of the stars, the structure of the seven heavens, and a timeline of divine history that matched passages from the long-banned Book of Enoch. He wrote, Uriel showed me the gears of the firmament, the songs of the sun, and the fate of the watchers who fell. Most disturbingly, Lucio believed he was not just a messenger, but a vessel. A soul returned. In a fevered entry dated Easter Sunday, 1964, he wrote, I remember now. The flood. The scribes of the stars. I stood at the edge of the world and was lifted up. I am he who walked with God and was not. Within months of writing that entry, Father Lucio was transferred to a mental hospital under Vatican order. The journal was seized, and mention of his name quietly disappeared from Jesuit records. But a copy of the manuscript, believed to be transcribed by one of his students, resurfaced in the 1990s and has since been the subject of intense speculation among independent theologians and mystics. Why would the Vatican suppress such a text? Was it mere delusion? Or did Father Lucio tap into something ancient, something dangerous to the official narrative? Interestingly, several of the astronomical details in his writings, such as the axial precession cycle and the alignment of stars in Orion, were not commonly known at the time, and yet appear with uncanny accuracy. His descriptions of rotating heavens mirror both Enochian literature and Mayan star calendars. One passage reads, "There is a gate above the third firmament. From it descend beings of fire cloaked in silence. They teach not by voice, but by impression. Their eyes see into the scroll of the soul." Whether metaphor or memory delusion or divine insight, the journal of Father Lucio poses questions few dare to answer. If Enoch truly walked with God and was taken, could his return signify the nearing of an ancient cycle? Could the silence surrounding Lucio's claims be an act of spiritual protection, or a deeper concealment of truths long buried? The Vatican has never acknowledged the document publicly, but some believe it still lies sealed in the secret archives, marked not by its heresy, but by the fear of what it might reveal. And if the angel Uriel truly whispered once again, who else might he be speaking to now? The Forbidden Dream of Jesus, the Record. Vatican declared heretical. Hidden deep in the restricted archives of the Vatican lies a peculiar manuscript, one that few have ever laid eyes on, and even fewer dare to mention. This document, cryptically labeled Somnium Jesu in Latin, the Dream of Jesus, has never been officially acknowledged by the Church. Yet it appears in a private catalog of censored writings reviewed during the Counter-Reformation, its pages marked with the inked stamp Heresis Manifest Heresy Manifest. The manuscript is written in a strange mixture of Greek and Aramaic, but also bears annotations in medieval Latin, suggesting it was preserved and translated across generations of monastic scribes. It begins not with a sermon or vision, but with a dream attributed to Jesus of Nazareth himself. According to the document, Jesus, during his time in the wilderness, experienced a night where time folded and he entered what he called the garden beyond memory. In the dream, Jesus is guided by a radiant being of light, described with the words, Urielus, the keeper of the revolving stars. This entity shows him a great wheel made of crystal turning endlessly in the void. Upon this wheel are etched countless human faces, some crying, some laughing, others still. Jesus asks what the wheel is, and Uriel replies, "It is the path of return. It is the echo of every soul that forgets and remembers. It is what the Father set in motion when the first breath was given to clay." The narrative continues with symbolic scenes that appear almost like parables. A soul is shown descending from light, clothed in flesh, struggling through lifetimes of greed, sorrow, and war. Another climbs upward, shedding identity like old garments. Jesus sees himself reflected in all of them, sometimes as a teacher, other times as a listener, sometimes as a mere witness. In one line it says, "And he knew then that the Son of Man walks many roads before he knows his own name." The most controversial portion comes at the end, where the manuscript claims Jesus spoke of reincarnation not as punishment, but as mercy. "What is life, Shemas and Mosts?" he is quoted as saying, "but the kindness of the Father allowing us to return until we learn to love as he does." He sees the cycles of the world not as random suffering, but as a sacred process, one designed for purification and remembrance. It is easy to see why the Vatican banned such content. The concept of reincarnation directly contradicted early church doctrine, which sought a singular life, a final judgment, and a fixed heaven or hell. But the dream did not deny salvation, it reimagined it. It painted God not as judge alone, but as patient gardener, letting each seed of the soul bloom in its own time. Some believe this document was originally part of the lost Gospel of the Hebrews, or perhaps an apocryphal vision once shared only among mystics. Others argue it is a forgery created centuries later to justify esoteric traditions. But one detail stands out, a marginal note added in the 12th century, by an anonymous monk, perhaps moved by what he read. "If this be a lie, then may all who seek truth walk blind. But if this be the forgotten path, may the stars lead us back to the light." Today, the Somnium Jesu remains locked behind Vatican seals. But the question lingers in the shadows of faith. What if Jesus really did dream of the soul's return? And what if the Church silenced that vision to preserve its power over those who never remembered their past life? Porta Alchemica, the Hermetic gateway of Rome and its mysterious link to the Vatican. Just a few miles from the Sacred Heart of the Vatican, hidden in the quiet gardens of Piazza Vittorio in Rome, stands a monument unlike any other in the Eternal City. It's not a church, it's not a temple. It's a door that leads nowhere. And yet for centuries, this doorway has captivated alchemists, mystics, and conspiracy theorists alike. Its name is Porta Alchemica, the alchemical door. At first glance, it seems like a forgotten ruin, a tall marble archway standing alone in the middle of a park. But upon closer inspection, the symbols carved into its surface begin to whisper secrets. Latin inscriptions, astrological sigils, obscure geometric patterns. And most notably, phrases attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary sage of Hermeticism, whom many believe to be a composite of the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek god Hermes. Etched above the arch are words that have puzzled generations. The center is in the triangle of the center. The medicine of the metals is within the arch of the king. What kind of medicine? What kind of arch? Some interpret this as a reference to the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance said to grant immortality and transmute base metals into gold. Others believe the doorway itself may have once been part of a larger structure used for actual alchemical rites, perhaps even timekeeping or interdimensional travel. According to historical records, Porta Alchemica was built in the late 1600s by Massimiliano Palombara, a nobleman and scholar of esoteric arts who had close ties with alchemists, Kabbalists, and Rosicrucians. Rumors circulated that Palombara hosted secret meetings on alchemical practices, and that he once witnessed a man vanish through this very door after performing a mysterious ritual. The man's notes were found scattered near the site, some in ciphered Hebrew, others in Hermetic Latin, detailing transformations of divine fire and metallic spirit. So where does the Vatican come in? Here's where things get strange. Within the Vatican archives are at least 3 separate references to Porta Alchemica in 18th century correspondence documents exchanged between the Congregation of the Index and a group known as the Hermetic Society of the Key. These letters were stamped with seals of secrecy and discussed whether Porta Alchemica posed a theological risk. One chilling line reads, "The symbols may predate Rome. They refer to a gateway once known to the Watchers." the door must not be opened. It's unclear what was meant by the Watchers, but some researchers tie this to the same group of angelic beings mentioned in the Book of Enoch, those who descended from heaven and revealed divine knowledge to humans. Was Porta Alchemica built upon or near one of these ancient gateways? Could it have been a remnant of pre-Christian esoteric knowledge, one the Church had an interest in suppressing, or at least keeping silent? Even today, visitors come to see the lonely door, taking photos of its inscriptions and debating what, if anything, lies behind or beneath it. It remains sealed. No hinges, no handles, just symbols and stone. But some whisper that if the inscriptions were fully decoded and if the correct planetary alignments were met, the door could still respond. Could Porta Alchemica be a forgotten node of ancient knowledge, left in plain sight? Could the Vatican's silence on it suggest that they know far more than they let on? And if this was just one door, how many others still stand hidden in the shadows of power? In the next chapter, we'll explore the secret Vatican obsession with maps of lost continents and civilizations, including a forbidden chart said to show the location of Atlantis. The Divine Mirror, said to reveal the spirit realm. Tucked away in obscure monastery inventories and apocryphal footnotes of early Christian mystics, there are whispers of an artifact few have ever seen. Yet those who claim to have used it describe visions that defy explanation. It is called the Gung Chiu Tin, or heaven-reflecting mirror, a crystalline device shaped like a faceted prism said to have been used in ancient rites to peer into the realms beyond our own. Unlike the polished metal mirrors of antiquity or the scrying bowls of the East, this object was no ordinary surface for reflection. Descriptions vary, but most agree it was crafted from a translucent, almost glowing mineral, likely obsidian quartz or even a now lost alchemical compound. The mirror was mounted upon a triangular pedestal aligned to the stars, used only during specific lunar phases. According to documents recovered from Benedictine and Eastern Syrian monasteries, the mirror was activated through chants written in Syriac and Greek phrases that called upon the eyes of heaven to open. But what did it reveal? Accounts speak of moving lights, unfamiliar constellations, and even figures of light appearing not on the surface, but seemingly inside the mirror. Some monks believed it to be a divine tool, showing visions from heaven. Others feared it was a threshold device capable of connecting the mind to other dimensions, including what they called regnum interius, the inner kingdom. One record attributed to the 9th century mystic Emilianus of Cluny describes seeing a tower made of breath and fire, with stairways of silence rising toward a throne made of memory. Another monk reported hearing the sound of wings not made of matter, followed by days of prophetic dreams. What's more intriguing is that the Vatican appears to have once held one of these devices. In a letter preserved in the private correspondences of Cardinal Bellarmine, a reference is made to a speculum angelorum, a mirror used during a crisis of belief among monks in Umbria, who began receiving shared visions. The letter ends abruptly with the order, seal the item. Confine it to the Archivum Secretum. Modern esoteric scholars have speculated that the Gung Chiu Tin could be a lost hermetic instrument, perhaps similar to the Urim and Thummim of Hebrew tradition, or even an Atlantean relic preserved through underground networks of early mystics. Whatever its origin, the Church's decision to bury any mention of it hints at one unsettling possibility that such a device may have shown things not meant to be seen by the mortal eye. And that brings us to the next chapter in our journey through the Vatican's forbidden records, one not of visions or mirrors, but of maps. Ancient unshared maps. In the next segment, we'll uncover the secret cartography of the Vatican, forbidden charts of the pre-flood world. The secret cartography of the Vatican, forbidden charts of the pre-flood world. Beneath the marble floors and golden domes of the Vatican lies not only scripture and sanctity, but maps. Ancient maps. Maps that whisper of a world before ours. Hidden within the Archivum Secretum the Vatican's most restricted collection, exist documents that challenge the linear timeline of human history. They are not mere artistic renderings or theological illustrations, but precise cartographic records that defy explanation. These are the forbidden charts of the pre-flood world, according to accounts from early explorers granted rare archival access. Some of these maps show detailed coastlines of Antarctica without ice. Others depict land masses now submerged beneath the Atlantic Ocean, bearing names no longer found on Earth, Antilia Thule, and the most controversial of all Atlantis. One anonymous 18th century Jesuit scholar reportedly discovered a Greek-translated chart describing a city of light in the Western Ocean, destroyed in the age of the falling stars. The authenticity of these maps has long been debated, but they share something in common with the infamous Piri Reis map, a real-world artifact created in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. That map too showed the Antarctic coast centuries before modern discovery, and its source materials have never been fully identified. Whispers suggest that at least one of those sources came from a Vatican archive, copied from scrolls salvaged during the fall of Constantinople. Even more puzzling are annotations in Latin that seem to warn readers not to speak of what they see. One marginal note on a damaged map reads, "Terra haec deletum est per ignem et aquam, et iterum orietur cum lux orientis." This land was destroyed by fire and water, and shall rise again when the light returns from the east. Some believe these documents were compiled by early Christian scholars who inherited fragments of Babylonian, Egyptian, and Hellenistic geographies. Others propose a more unsettling theory, that the Church possessed knowledge of civilizations long predating the Genesis account of creation, and deliberately hid it to preserve theological orthodoxy. If that's true, then what lies beneath the surface of these forbidden charts may not just be lost continents, but lost truths. Truths about who we were before the flood, about what kinds of beings once walked the earth, and about what may return should the cycle of ages begin anew. The map of a land. Before Adam, a forgotten geography in the Vatican archive. Deep within the fortified corridors of the Vatican Apostolic Archives behind iron gates, labyrinthine passageways, and strict ecclesiastical protocol, there is said to exist a parchment unlike any other. Not a gospel, not a decree, but a map. A map with no date, no title, no compass rose, and most unnervingly, no resemblance to any known landmass on Earth today. Scholars who've had brief access to early inventory lists from the 17th century refer to it simply as Codex Nullius Terrae, the manuscript of no man's land. Measuring roughly 24 by 36 inches, drawn in faded black ink on aged vellum, the map appears to depict an immense continent surrounded by 4 rivers and bordered by what could be interpreted as mountains, although their jagged symmetry suggests something far less natural. Its coastlines are not labeled. No cities are marked. Instead, the map is inscribed with a few lines in ancient Syriac, one of which reads, "This is the land before the time of Adam. It does not belong to mankind." That sentence alone was enough to stir panic among traditional theologians when it was first whispered about in academic circles in the 1930s. Was this map meant to be symbolic? Or was it a preserved memory of an antediluvian world, one that existed before biblical history even began? Several researchers have drawn parallels between this unknown geography and ancient myths of pre-Adamic civilizations, long suppressed or rebranded as metaphor. The Book of Jubilees and the Ethiopian Book of Enoch make cryptic references to ages of giants and sons of light who were wiped out before the dawn of Adam. Even older Sumerian texts speak of kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years before the Great Reordering. Could this map be the missing visual fragment of those forgotten myths? Some claim that the land shown corresponds to no tectonic plates currently known to geology. Others suggest that the position matches descriptions of a continent submerged in ancient cataclysm, perhaps the inspiration for Plato's Atlantis, or even a civilization more ancient than Lemuria. One Vatican archivist, under condition of anonymity, reportedly described the map as a truth too old for men to remember, and too dangerous for men to repeat. There is also a curious absence, no mention of humanity on the entire map. Instead, small symbols resembling winged figures, radiant circles, and spiral gates are scattered along the terrain. These images echo iconography seen in ancient Assyrian seals, early Kabbalistic diagrams, and mystical Hindu mandalas, all cultures that speak of divine or semi-divine beings descending from the heavens before man's time. What was this land? A cradle of forgotten gods? A laboratory of celestial engineers, or merely a medieval fantasy drawn by an overzealous monk? And why would the Vatican, an institution deeply rooted in linear biblical chronology, choose to keep such a map rather than destroy it? Perhaps it serves a quiet function, not as doctrine, not as history, but as a reminder that not all truth comes dressed in Scripture, and that some secrets must lie dormant until the world is ready. As more documents slowly come to light from the shadowed vaults of Rome, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The map of the world as we know it may only be a chapter preceded by a prelude we were never meant to read. And in the quiet corners of the Vatican's forbidden archives, the prelude still waits. Chronovisor, the device that could see the past. Hidden deep within the Vatican's secret archives, rumors persist of a device so astonishing it defies both science and theology. Known as the Chronovisor, this alleged invention has fascinated conspiracy theorists and historians alike for decades. Said to be developed in the mid-20th century by a team of scientists that included Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk and physicist. The Chronovisor was not a time machine in the traditional sense. Rather, it was described as a viewing apparatus that allowed the user to observe past events as if tuning into the echoes of time itself. According to those who claim to have seen or worked on the project, the machine could visualize and even hear historical moments by capturing residual electromagnetic imprints left in the environment like a cosmic playback. Most sensational of all, Ernetti insisted that the Chronovisor had been used to witness the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and even speeches by lost Roman emperors. In 1972, an alleged photo surfaced depicting Christ on the cross, supposedly taken through the Chronovisor. While this image was later claimed to be a forgery, copied from a 19th century sculpture, the myth refused to die. Ernetti maintained his story until his death, though he later signed a retraction that some believe was coerced. Others close to him hinted that he never really renounced his claims, and that the Vatican had intervened to suppress the machine and any remaining documentation. According to certain leaked accounts, the Church feared that such a device could undermine the mystery of faith, or worse, expose truths long buried beneath centuries of theological tradition. Skeptics argue that the Chronovisor is a hoax or misinterpretation of scientific ambition. Yet the idea persists, part science fiction, part spiritual enigma. If true, it suggests that history is not entirely lost, but preserved in the very fabric of time, waiting to be seen again. And if such a device ever truly existed, one must ask, what else might the Vatican have seen? And what secrets were deemed too powerful for the world to know? Perhaps the next clue lies in the Jesuit records surrounding astronomical phenomena, or in the sealed scrolls describing the voices heard from the stars. The deeper one goes, the more the past begins to speak. The Vatican and the quest for the sword of Archangel Michael. Among the most whispered legends, hidden deep within the marble corridors of the Vatican, is one that sounds more like an epic tale than historical inquiry. The search for the sword of Archangel Michael. A weapon said to have been wielded by the Prince of Heavenly Hosts himself, forged not by human hands, but in divine fire, a sword that cut down Lucifer in the rebellion of the heavens, and one day, as prophecy claims, shall strike once more at the end of time. Though most official doctrine refers to this sword in purely symbolic terms, suggesting it represents righteousness or divine authority, not everyone in the Church's long history has agreed. In fact, for centuries, whispers have persisted among the inner circles of the Vatican Curia. suggesting that the sword was real, tangible, hidden, protected, or sought. Some of the earliest clues appear in Gnostic texts and obscure fragments written in Syriac and Greek, where a flaming blade of judgment is said to have descended from the heavens to seal the gates of Eden. Later, early Christian mystics expanded this myth, claiming that the sword was not returned to heaven, but instead remained on earth, concealed until the final war between light and darkness. The most compelling link comes not from scripture, but from a series of mysterious sites spanning Europe. Along a perfectly straight line running from Skellig Michael off the coast of Ireland through Mont Saint-Michel in France to Monte Sant'Angelo in Italy, 7 sacred sanctuaries dedicated to Michael, the Archangel, have stood for over a millennium. This line, astonishing in its geometric precision, has come to be known as the Sword of St. Michael line. To believers, this isn't coincidence, it's a celestial map. In the early 20th century, a set of restricted Vatican documents reportedly re-examined this Michael line not as a path of devotion, but as a possible route leading to the location of the angelic weapon itself. One particularly controversial theory came from a Jesuit historian named Father Alessandro Bruni, who spent over 2 decades analyzing ancient cartographic overlays and Benedictine chronicles. In a private letter discovered posthumously, Bruni wrote, "The sword is not metaphor. It was placed where no empire could reach beneath a shrine built on the bones of silence. Only the faithful will see it. Only the chosen may touch it." That letter sparked a wave of quiet interest inside the Vatican. Between 1935 and 1938, there were rumors never confirmed of a secret expedition commissioned by the Holy See to investigate underground chambers beneath Monte Sant'Angelo in southern Italy. Allegedly, they found something behind a sealed wall. Not a sword exactly, but an object that seemed to radiate a low, humming vibration and intense warmth. Some accounts describe it as shaped like a blade, but composed of an unknown substance dull to the eye, yet alive to the touch. The chamber was resealed. The reports were locked away. And to the public, nothing ever happened. In recent years, new claims have emerged from within the Vatican's own archival network. A few brave researchers, often met with silence or quiet reassignment, have suggested that the Church may not be safeguarding the sword for its own sake, but waiting for a sign. A prophecy long buried in the Apocrypha that speaks of a time when the blade shall burn once more, and he who lifts it shall not be clothed in armor, but in light. Whether the sword is real or not, one thing is certain: the legend refuses to fade. And for an institution like the Vatican, obsessed with continuity, tradition, and divine order, the persistence of such a myth might mean something more. Perhaps the blade was never meant to be found by archaeologists. Perhaps it waits as the Archangel did for the final battle. And perhaps the Vatican already knows when that day will come. Liber Linteus, the ancient linen book in Etruscan, why is the only complete copy hidden in the Vatican? In a world where ancient knowledge is often lost to time, there exists a manuscript unlike any other, a book not carved in stone or written on papyrus, but inscribed on linen. Known as the Liber Linteus Zagrabiensis, or simply the Linen Book. This extraordinary artifact is the oldest surviving book written in the mysterious and still undeciphered Etruscan language. But what many don't know is that while the only physical copy known to the public rests in Croatia, multiple sources suggest that the Vatican holds a more complete version, kept in total secrecy. The Liber Linteus was discovered in the 19th century, oddly enough, not in a library or a tomb, but wrapped around the body of a female mummy from Egypt, serving as burial linen. Its journey from ancient Italy to a sarcophagus in Egypt remains one of the greatest archaeological puzzles. Written in horizontal lines with red section dividers, the script flows with eerie precision, almost like a calendar, a liturgical ritual, or a spiritual code. Scholars have long debated its content. Some believe it outlines a religious calendar used by Etruscan priests. Others suggest it may contain ritual formulas incantations, or even warnings passed down from a civilization that mysteriously vanished just before the Roman Empire rose to dominance. But with the Etruscan language still largely undeciphered, the full message of the Liber Lenteus remains locked away, its true purpose a whisper in the dark. And this is where the Vatican enters the story. According to a few leaked reports from early 20th century researchers granted limited access to the Vatican's secret archives, there exists a version of the Liber Lenteus that is far more complete than the fragmented one in public view, possibly with sections never before documented. The Vatican has never acknowledged this, of course. But curious mentions in medieval catalogs dating back to the 1400s refer to a white scripture with red division lines written in a forgotten tongue. Some suspect this refers to the linen manuscript. Why would the Vatican preserve such a document? And more importantly, why keep it hidden? One hypothesis is that the content of the Liber Lenteus may contradict foundational narratives of Western religious history. If the book contains references to pre-Christian rituals, celestial beings, or a cycle of soul reincarnation, common among early Etruscan beliefs, it could destabilize key theological dogmas. There are even claims that the text speaks of star messengers, 12 cycles of descent, and a veiled fire that grants vision without death. Even more compelling. In 1963, a Vatican linguist reportedly attempted to translate part of the manuscript and was later silenced under a rare votum. Silentiae, a vow of silence enforced by ecclesiastical law. Could the Liber Lenteus hold remnants of a sacred science? A link between early Italian mystery schools and older civilizations like Egypt or Sumer? Or perhaps even encoded instructions on how the soul journeys through cosmic layers? Something the Church has long avoided discussing publicly. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: the Liber Lenteus remains a spectral voice from a forgotten world. And if the Vatican does indeed possess a complete version locked away beneath layers of guarded corridors and papal secrecies, humanity is perhaps one key away from unlocking a window into a civilization that may have known more about life, death, and the soul than we dare imagine. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine a sacred cloth unrolled by torchlight, a text not meant to survive, and yet here it is. Whispers from the linen, stitched in forgotten script, waiting for the moment someone finally listens. And perhaps, somewhere in the shadows of the Vatican, that moment is being delayed. The Book of Angelic Language. Enochian by John D. in the Vatican Archives. Did the Church once study the art of summoning angels? In the hushed corridors beneath the Vatican, where centuries of forbidden manuscripts lie buried under dust and doctrine, there are rumors of a peculiar volume written in a language not of men, but of heaven. This is the Enochian book, not a part of the Bible, nor a heretical gospel, but a linguistic codex compiled by the Elizabethan polymath and court magician Dr. John Dee, alongside his medium Edward Kelly in the late 16th century, a language said to have been dictated directly by angels. John Dee, once the personal advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, was no ordinary man of letters. He studied astronomy, alchemy, navigation, and mathematics, but his deepest fascination was always metaphysical, the veil between worlds. Between 1582 and 1589, he claimed to have received divine communications from celestial beings, using a scrying mirror and crystal ball to channel their words through Kelly. These entities identified themselves as angels, but not in any traditional Christian sense. They spoke a fluid otherworldly language, Enochian, named after the biblical prophet Enoch, who had walked with God. Dee meticulously recorded these sessions into journals, transcribing not only the conversations, but also the grammar, syntax, and even the alphabet of this angelic tongue. The system was astonishingly complete, an entire celestial lexicon filled with keys, seals, calls, and charts of heavenly realms. And while many dismissed Dee as a madman or occultist, some of his writings disappeared after his death, only to reappear centuries later in the restricted sections of the Vatican Library. Why would the Catholic Church preserve the work of an English magician, one condemned by his own era? because beneath the appearance of chaos there was order, beneath the mysticism structure, and perhaps truth. Several leaked letters from Jesuit scholars of the 18th century speak of a lingua ad caelestium, the language of the celestial ones, and make references to diagrams strikingly similar to Dee's angelic tablets. One report even speculated that the Enochian key's 48 poetic incantations meant to open spiritual realms might correspond to layers of heaven described in certain apocryphal Jewish texts. Even more intriguing is the claim that Pope Clement XII in the 1730s authorized a secret comparative study between the Enochian language and the language of glossolalia, speaking in tongues, observed in early Christian mystics. That project too vanished without a trace. Could it be that the Vatican, long feared for silencing esoteric knowledge, has in fact attempted to decode it behind closed doors? Dee believed that Enochian was the language used by angels to create the world and by Adam before the fall. If that is true, then the Church may not have been hiding witchcraft, but something far more sacred, the original tongue of creation, a linguistic link between man and the divine. And perhaps they feared its power. According to a 1921 entry in a Jesuit inventory log, an unnamed manuscript written in red and gold ink on black vellum, labeled Tabula Calorum, was relocated to the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum under high security. Some believe it to be the missing Liber Loageth, the Book of God's Speech compiled by Dee, but never publicly seen. So the question remains: did the Vatican ever try to speak the language of angels? And if so, what answer? Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, imagine a hidden chamber lit by candlelight. A scholar whispering syllables older than Latin. And somewhere just beyond the veil, a presence begins to stir. In silence, in awe, in the forgotten tongue of heaven. The erased Kabbalistic manuscript, preserved not in Israel, but in the Vatican. A hidden map of the 10 celestial realms and the architecture of the soul. In the canon of Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah holds sacred weight, an esoteric framework of divine emanations often veiled in riddles and reserved only for the learned. But there are whispers that a certain manuscript, once part of the Jewish mystical corpus, was systematically erased from mainstream records, yet quietly preserved in the very heart of the Catholic world, the Vatican. Known among a few scholars as Sefer HaNistar, the Hidden Book. This ancient text was believed to contain a far more expansive vision of the cosmos than the widely known Zohar. A vision not just of 10 Sephira or divine attributes, but of 10 interlocking universes stacked like translucent spheres, each vibrating at different frequencies connected by bridges of consciousness. The manuscript reportedly mapped not only the celestial realms, but also the human soul's journey through these levels, offering a cosmological blueprint for spiritual ascent or descent, depending on one's deeds, awareness, and alignment with divine will. Each level bore names that don't appear in other texts. Ketharon Malakel Ayin Shemesh, and each realm was guarded by an angelic intelligence, many of which resemble beings, described in early Christian Gnostic writings and even Mesopotamian lore. So why was it suppressed? Some say that after the destruction of the Second Temple, this version of the Kabbalah was declared too dangerous. It challenged centralized rabbinic authority, hinting that divine connection didn't require ritual intermediaries, only inner purity and knowledge of the path. Others argue it blended too many outside ideas, Pythagorean harmonics, Egyptian astronomy, even Proto-Sufi meditation practices. By the 9th century, all known copies vanished from Jewish archives. And yet, a Vatican inventory from the 17th century lists a parchment titled De Architectura Divinitatis, Tractus Hebraeus, on the architecture of divinity, a Hebrew treatise. Written in Aramaic and heavily annotated in Latin, it contains diagrams remarkably similar to the Kabbalistic tree of life, yet with additional branches extending outward like a multi-dimensional fractal. Some believe this is the lost Sefer HaNistar. According to a 1912 private letter from a Jesuit linguist to his cardinal superior, The manuscript outlines how sound, light, and geometry were used in ancient temples to open gateways between realms, and includes cryptic formulas written in a blend of Hebrew and Enochian. He called it a map not only of heaven, but of how to return there. If true, the implications are staggering, that the Vatican has safeguarded a mystical Jewish document offering a universal map of creation and of the soul's place within it. One too powerful, perhaps, for open dissemination. Could this manuscript be the missing link between Jewish mysticism, early Christianity, and other ancient esoteric schools? Could it be the root that many branches? Kabbalah, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and even alchemy once shared. And if so, why has it never been made public? Perhaps because it tells a truth too profound, that the divine spark in every soul is not just a metaphor, but a coordinate waiting to find its way home. As you fall asleep tonight, imagine a manuscript hidden behind locked gates, illuminated by candlelight, a lone monk tracing lines between stars and spirits, and a soul not unlike yours, slowly remembering the path it once walked across the heavens. The forgotten records of 300-year lifespans, erased from the Vatican's canon of saints, ancient testimonies of longevity, hidden in the shadows of history. In a quiet corner of the Vatican's archival wing, there once existed a file handwritten on parchment, faded with time, that told of something extraordinary. It was not a miracle of healing, nor a martyrdom recorded in glory. It was something far more disturbing to official theology, a collection of testimonies and hagiographies describing saints, monks, and hermits who reportedly lived not for decades, but for centuries. Some manuscripts claimed lifespans of 180 years, 223 years, even over 300 years, complete with detailed chronicles of births, monastic vows, teachings, and even final resting places. These records appeared across different regions and centuries. Desert fathers in Egypt, anchorites in Cappadocia, mystics in Eastern Europe. Many of them were described as possessing profound calm, ageless skin and memories that spanned empires. They ate little, slept rarely, and most notably vanished before death could be witnessed. One particularly haunting account, labeled only Sanctus Alias, tells of a man born in 134 BC who was last seen walking into a forest in northern Gaul in 171 AD. His face bore the stillness of stars, wrote the anonymous scribe, and his tongue remembered the tongues of Babel. Another account, once part of a now-lost codex, claims that a certain Sister Ariadne of Antioch lived for 306 years, serving under 9 bishops without a wrinkle. But where are these records now? By the late Renaissance, such testimonies were quietly removed from the canon of sainthood. The Congregation for the Causes of Saints, the Vatican body responsible for verifying miracles and documenting holy lives, issued internal guidelines in 1623 urging the correction or removal of accounts that could not be measured by the natural lifespan. In effect, anything that challenged the known boundaries of biology was deemed apocryphal. Why? Some believe these lifespans were viewed as heretical. Not because they were impossible, but because they suggested knowledge of spiritual practices or divine laws that had not been sanctioned by the Church. Whispers of ancient breathing techniques, energetic transmutation, and celestial alignment rituals were too close to Eastern esotericism. Too similar to forgotten truths from the Book of Enoch or the lost writings of the Essenes. There are hints that a few of these files still exist under coded classification, or buried within broader martyrologies, but access is restricted even to most clergy. A 1967 Jesuit memorandum briefly mentions theological complications surrounding verified testimonies of extended human life in excess of 3 generations, but ends with a terse Latin phrase, non divulgare, periculum fidei, do not release, danger to the faith. Could these forgotten saints have discovered the keys to unlocking human longevity? Not through potions, but through purity, asceticism, and divine alignment. Were they remnants of an older humanity? one that remembered how to live in harmony with celestial rhythms. And more importantly, why did the Vatican choose silence? As you drift into sleep, imagine a monastery lost to time. A figure tending its garden in the same robe worn 2 centuries prior, and a candle flickering beside pages no one is allowed to read. Pages that whisper across the ages that death was never the only path. The Sirius visitors. Did the Vatican preserve ancient Egyptian accounts of star beings, a forbidden record of celestial contact, hidden beneath layers of faith? Somewhere within the stone vaults of the Vatican Apostolic Archive, behind catalogs of saints and transcripts of councils, there are whispers of a document that never made it to public theology. A copy of a far older record, said to be transcribed from the walls of a now collapsed Egyptian temple and hand-delivered to the Vatican during the Crusades. This document, untranslated in the official index, contains a staggering claim that priests of ancient Egypt once received beings from the stars, specifically from the star system we now call Sirius. It is referred to by the few scholars who've heard of it as the Sirius dossier. The record begins with hymns, praises to Sopdet, the goddess linked to Sirius. But then it shifts into something far more strange narrative prose written in a sacred dialect, recounting the descent of shining ones from a pillar of light in the sky. These entities, it says, spoke without mouths, moved without feet, and revealed diagrams of the heavens far beyond the stars known to men. According to the translation notes scribbled centuries later in Latin, these visitors came not to conquer, but to teach. They stayed for 11 days. The priests, whose names were later scratched out, were taken to the edge of the sky, shown the wheel of souls, and instructed in a harmonic language that could call upon the pulse of the great star. It sounds like myth, like poetic metaphor, and perhaps it is. But what unnerves historians is this: in the 1960s, French anthropologist Marcel Griol uncovered Dogon tribal traditions in Mali, describing nearly identical visitor star beings from Sirius who came to Earth to guide early civilization. The Dogon knew of Sirius B, an invisible star to the naked eye, long before Western astronomers confirmed its existence. The descriptions are uncannily similar. Fish-like beings, advanced star maps, and the egg of beginning from which the world was formed. Could there be a forgotten Egyptian root to this? Could both traditions stem from the same encounter? The Vatican has never acknowledged possessing any such document, but a 1938 index entry labeled Documentum Egypticum 92-X was later sealed and now appears in no public catalog. A Jesuit archivist who later renounced his post once wrote, "The record contains heresies not against Christ, but against the boundaries of what we allow humanity to remember." Why would the Church fear such a story? Perhaps because it doesn't contradict faith, it expands it, suggesting that divine messengers may not have come only through prophets, but through stars. That ancient knowledge may have been seeded not through scripture, but through celestial contact. And perhaps, just perhaps, the so-called gods of Egypt were not gods at all, but emissaries. And their return, as promised in the document's closing line, is not a matter of belief, but of timing. When the sun stands still and the eye opens in the sky, they shall walk once more among the keepers of truth. As you fall into sleep, consider this. What else might lie in the deepest shelves of the Vatican? A temple's echo, a cosmic visitor's map, a truth too vast for dogma. The rite of the red veil, a forbidden ceremony to witness the divine. Beneath the solemn silence of ancient convent walls, far from the chants of the Sistine Chapel, and beyond the reach of public doctrine, lies one of the most elusive mysteries whispered in the shadows of ecclesiastical history: the rite of the red veil. This is no ordinary ritual. It is said to be performed only in secret for a select group of cloistered nuns who have demonstrated an unshakable purity of heart and unwavering spiritual discipline. And according to forbidden texts, preserved only in fragments, this rite was not intended to glorify sainthood, but to grant visions unearthly, prophetic, and dangerously profound. The name comes from a single sacred item, a translucent crimson veil, delicate as breath dyed using a mixture said to contain crushed rose petals, saffron threads, and a trace of sanctified blood. The veil is not merely symbolic, it is central. During the rite, the chosen nun would fast for 7 days, speaking no word, making no eye contact, remaining in isolation within a sealed chamber known in ancient manuscripts as lumen absconditum, the hidden light. The chamber was lit by 7 candles, each representing a seal from the Book of Revelation. The final act involved placing the red veil across the eyes, while a high priestess, often the Mother Superior herself, recited a forbidden invocation in a language described as closer to vibration than speech. Eyewitness accounts. There are none, at least not officially. But hidden within the Vatican Apostolic Archive is a letter from a 17th century Spanish bishop who claims to have received a sealed confession from a nun who underwent the rite. She wrote, "When the veil fell over my eyes, the world melted into flame. And through the fire I saw cities not of this earth, beings without time in the face of the Lamb, crowned not with thorns but stars." Her final lines, "I have no words for what I saw. I only pray I will not see again." Another note scribbled in Latin on the margin of a forgotten 18th century codex warns, "Those who gaze behind the veil may never return whole. The vision blesses and burns." The Church has never acknowledged the rite. It exists only in rumor, cloaked in denial, buried beneath centuries of dust. Yet whispers persist that it has been practiced as recently as the early 20th century, particularly during times of spiritual drought, when miracles ceased and faith faltered. Some theologians believe it was created as a last resort, a gateway between the divine and the dying world. A desperate method to contact heaven when even prayer was met with silence. The veil itself is thought to be a relic, perhaps fashioned from the funeral wrappings of early Christian martyrs, or even from the legendary cloth used to wipe Christ's brow on the road to Calvary. Some versions of the legend claim it was woven by a blind mystic in Antioch who said angels dictated the pattern to her in dreams. Today, any mention of the rite of the red veil is met with silence or dismissal by Vatican officials. But in certain cloisters behind locked doors and forgotten chapels, there remain signs, hidden alcoves with crimson embroidery, ancient hymns with verses too esoteric to decode, and nuns who sit for hours with closed eyes and tear-streaked cheeks as if waiting to see something just beyond the veil of this world. And so the question remains, was the rite of the red veil a mystical path to divine revelation, or a dangerous flirtation with realms the Church would rather leave untouched? Perhaps the answer lies in the next forbidden tale. Liber Vox Caelestis, the Book of Celestial Voices, said to record songs only angels can hear. Liber Vox Caelestis, the Book of Celestial Voices. Deep within the restricted archives of the Vatican, beyond the reach of the public eye, and buried beneath centuries of silence, there are whispered accounts of a mysterious manuscript known as Liber Vox Caelestis, translated as the Book of Celestial Voices. This ancient codex is unlike any other volume ever recorded in religious or musical history. It is said to contain no clear words, no visible notation in the human sense, and yet it sings, not audibly, not in the way a choir echoes beneath cathedral domes, but through what early mystics called resonantia animae, the resonance of the soul. According to a letter dated to the 13th century by a Benedictine scribe named Amatus of Tours, the book was not written by human hands alone. He claimed it was delivered in a dream by beings robed in fire and silence. And when he awoke, the manuscript was lying at the foot of his bed, bound in pale leather with no title on the spine. Inside were page after page of symbols, sigils, and inkless lines that shimmered faintly under candlelight, but disappeared in full sun. What made Liber Vox Caelestis so revered and feared was not its appearance, but its effect. Those who gazed upon it too long reportedly began to hum unknown melodies in their sleep. Some described hearing choirs of impossible harmony voices that overlapped in languages never spoken on Earth, with chords that brought them to tears without understanding why. Others spoke of entering trance-like states, during which they recited words they'd never learned, words that scholars later traced back to Proto-Syriac, Angelic dialects long extinct. One nun, Sister Aurelia of Montserrat, wrote in her final journal, "The book does not speak, it listens. And then it plays back the memory of heaven, not as I remember it, but as heaven remembers me." Rumors persisted that Liber Vox Caelestis was once presented before the papal court during the Renaissance, but was quickly removed from circulation due to its unsettling spiritual influence. A Vatican theologian reportedly described it as a divine frequency trapped in parchment. Another record claimed that Pope Leo X himself ordered it sealed beneath the Sistine Chapel, fearing it could open the ears of men to voices not meant for earth. Scholars of esoteric Christianity believe Liber Vox Caelestis may be connected to the lost hymns of the Watchers, angelic beings mentioned in apocryphal texts like the Book of Enoch. These beings were said to have taught early humans celestial knowledge, including a form of divine music that could heal the broken spirit and call down light from the stars. Some even suggest that these hymns were once sung during the days before the fall in Eden itself. Curiously, soundwave studies performed on certain sealed containers from the Vatican archives have revealed faint frequency patterns not attributed to any known language or musical scale. While the Church has never publicly confirmed the contents of those containers, some believe Liber Vox Caelestis still resides within one of them, silent to the world, but vibrating ever so slightly, as if waiting for someone who can finally hear. And so the question remains, is there truly a music only angels can hear, or have we in our haste to silence mystery simply forgotten how to listen? Perhaps the answer awaits in the next enigma. The glass harp of Saint Cecilia, an instrument said to play by itself during divine apparitions, in the hushed shadows of sacred chapels and ancient cloisters. There lingers a legend so delicate it is almost sung rather than spoken. It is the story of the glass harp of Saint Cecilia, a fragile crystalline instrument that, according to hidden Vatican chronicles, has played celestial melodies on its own, but only during moments of divine visitation. Saint Cecilia, the patroness of music and heavenly harmony, has long been revered for her spiritual connection to sound. But what few know is that hidden within the basilica dedicated to her name beneath the mosaics and marble is said to be a locked reliquary containing a musical instrument. Unlike any other, a harp not of string or wood but of spun glass and silver thread. This glass harp, as the tale goes, was forged in the 9th century by monks who claimed to be guided in dreams by an invisible cantor of light. Rather than crafting it for earthly concerts, the monks believed it to be a vessel, an oracle of sound capable of vibrating in harmony with celestial presence. The harp was never plucked by human hands. Instead, it responded to changes in the spiritual atmosphere, vibrating gently during mass prayers, and on rare occasions, ringing out a single piercing note during supposed apparitions. According to a 15th century document sealed in the Vatican's musical archives, the harp once sang a full 7-note melody, soft, trembling like wind through stained glass on the very night a cloistered nun reported seeing the Virgin Mary walk through the altar of Saint Cecilia's crypt. Witnesses claimed no one touched the instrument, yet its shimmering tones echoed through the stone chamber with haunting clarity. A bishop at the time wrote, "We heard what could only be described as the breath of angels made audible, but the harp's mystery deepens." Some Vatican archivists claim it resonates not only during holy visions, but also in the presence of extreme purity or deep sorrow. A priest in the 1700s recorded that during the plague, as many lay dying in prayer within the basilica, the harp sang 3 notes of lamentation, clear, mournful, and impossible to trace to any earthly source. To this day, access to the harp is restricted. It has never been placed on public display. The Vatican has never released a recording or photograph. Some claim it no longer plays, Others whisper that it has simply not been heard because the world has grown too loud, too proud, too closed to what is sacred and subtle. And yet, the harp remains, waiting, silent, until the next ripple of heaven brushes through our dimension once more. The Library of St. Malachy, the prophetic list of popes until the end of days. Deep within the archives of the Vatican, where dust gathers on forbidden manuscripts and the light of day rarely touches parchment, lies a prophecy so precise, so eerily accurate, that even high-ranking clerics avoid speaking of it openly. It is known as the Prophecy of the Popes, attributed to St. Malachy of Armagh, a 12th century Irish archbishop who, according to legend, received a divine vision during a pilgrimage to Rome. In this vision, he saw the entire line of Catholic pontiffs stretching from his time, all the way to the final pope who would preside over the fall of the church and the dawn of apocalypse. The prophecy is not a list of names, but a series of 112 cryptic Latin phrases, each describing the essence, origin, or symbolism of a future pope. For centuries, the manuscript was kept hidden, allegedly suppressed by the church itself due to its frightening implications. It was not officially published until 1595, more than 400 years after St. Malachy's death. And yet, since that time, scholars have matched many of the mottos to actual popes with uncanny accuracy. For example, pastor et nata, shepherd and sailor, was linked to Pope John XXIII, who was Patriarch of Venice, a city of ships. De Medietate Lunae. Of the half moon was attributed to Pope John Paul I, who was born during a half moon and died just one lunar cycle later. Each phrase, brief as it is, seems to align with either birthplace coat of arms or significant events during the pontificate. But what unsettles even the skeptical is the final line, number 112. He is called Peter the Roman, a shepherd, who will feed his flock amidst many tribulations, and in whose reign the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. Some interpret this as metaphor. Others fear it is literal. The current Pope Francis is listed as the 112th. He is not named Peter, but he is from the Jesuit order and the founder of that order. Ignatius of Loyola once declared St. Peter to be the spiritual cornerstone of their mission. Moreover, Pope Francis was born in Buenos Aires. Yet his full name is Jorge Mario Bergoglio, son of Italian immigrants, a Roman by bloodline. Coincident or fulfillment? The Vatican has never officially endorsed the prophecy, but it has also never fully denied it. The manuscript is said to reside in a private vault, possibly the same that houses the Liber Linteus, the Codex Arcanum, and other records too dangerous for public view. Some claim the last few pages of St. Malachy's writings were damaged. Others say they were removed altogether to prevent panic. What remains is this A-list, a countdown, and a silence that grows heavier with each passing year. The Black Pope, the Shadow Pontiff, and the theory of Vatican's true ruler. Not everyone knows that beyond the visible white-robed Pope who leads the Catholic Church in the public eye, there is another man, cloaked not in glory, but in shadow. He does not appear on balconies, nor kiss the ground upon arriving in new lands. Yet within the marble corridors of the Vatican, he is quietly acknowledged by another name, the Black Pope. This title doesn't refer to an actual papal office. It belongs to the Superior General of the Society of Jesus the Jesuits, a religious order founded in the 16th century by St. Ignatius of Loyola. From its inception, the Jesuit order has wielded remarkable influence, known for its intellectual prowess, rigid discipline, and deep loyalty to the Vatican. But behind closed doors, some believe the order's reach goes far beyond theology and missionary work. The Superior General is called Black Pope, not only because of his traditional black cassock, but for the sweeping authority he holds, often said to rival or even exceed that of the visible Pope. For centuries, whispers in both secular and religious circles have suggested that this man operates a kind of Vatican within the Vatican, overseeing Jesuit schools, global missions, intelligence networks, and financial operations across continents. In a handful of leaked documents, the phrase appears, "While the white pope rules the light, the black pope commands the dark." A poetic line, perhaps, but one that has fueled countless conspiracy theories and closer scrutiny by historians and skeptics alike. When Pope Francis himself, a Jesuit, was elected in 2013, many took it as confirmation of what had long been theorized, that the Jesuits were no longer behind the throne. They were on it. Was this the long-awaited shift in power? Or had it always been this way, only now made visible? Among classified Vatican archives are letters never made public documenting private discussions between popes and Jesuit generals. These letters mention regions like South America, Africa, and China, places where spiritual influence intersects with geopolitical strategy. Some researchers point to a rarely discussed element within the Jesuit hierarchy, the fourth vow. Unlike the standard vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, this secretive vow taken by elite members reportedly pledges unconditional loyalty to the Pope and a willingness to go wherever, do whatever, in service of the Church. The exact wording is unknown, but the impact is undeniable. For 5 centuries, Jesuits have moved quietly across history's most volatile frontiers, preaching, teaching, and sometimes intervening. So if the Vatican truly has 2 poles, one of light and one of silence, the Black Pope may very well stand at the center of the latter. And in the great game of spiritual and political power, perhaps the true ruler is not always the one on the balcony. Beneath the silent domes of the Vatican, where time seems to halt between candlelight and marble, countless secrets remain sealed. From forbidden maps and forgotten prophecies to machines that peer into the past and swords wielded by angels, each mystery feels like a fragment of a greater picture waiting for the brave to piece it together. Perhaps most of these stories are mere symbols, or perhaps they are truths encoded in the language of theology, mysticism, and time. Whatever the case, the Vatican continues to stand as a guardian at the threshold between what is seen and unseen, between faith and verification. And if you've made it with us to this final line, perhaps you too have felt it. The greatest secrets do not rest within stone walls or ancient vaults. They live within the question each of us must face. Do you believe in this noisy modern world, that a hidden truth still waits to be revealed? Thank you for listening. If you wish to continue exploring these ancient mysteries, hit subscribe to SleepCodex, not just to fall asleep, but to awaken. Inside your dreams, we'll be here always, waiting for you. In the stillness of night, where the sacred stories have yet to be told.